Story 1. Fiancé cheated on me, so I did the same to her and took revenge. I'm 27M, engaged to my long-term girlfriend, Fiona, 26F. We have been dating for over 3.5 years now and have been living together for over 2 years. Things were pretty smooth between us. We worked hard in our jobs, earned quite decently, and partied harder. We enjoyed each other's company and were happy and satisfied with life. This summer, after I got my promotion at work, I went down on my knees and proposed to her. We were planning our wedding this new year, but I think my destiny has something else stored for me. I don't know if I really want the wedding or not. Ever since the COVID lockdown was imposed, we were working from home until 5 months back when Fiona switched her job. Her new employer asked her to work from the office. It didn't come as a surprise to us because, since everything has bounced back to normal, so has the work culture. Soon after she started going to the office, I realized she was gradually changing. Initially, I thought it was just me overthinking, in her absence. Until then I was so used to having her with me in the house all the time. We ate together, partied together, and went out for jogs and walks together. We did almost everything together. Then suddenly she was away for more than 10 hours a day. It was natural for me to miss her. On top of that, I was working from home. Had I been going to the office, things would have been better. I somehow made peace with this, that she has to go to work and that she is not doing anything wrong. It's not her fault at all. I'll admit I was an a-hole for some time, but then I accepted that I was being overdramatic and got normal with the situation. While I was still struggling to make peace with her absence from the house for half the time, she started coming late from work. The worst part was she didn't inform me that she would be late. I kept waiting for her for dinner. When she came, she said she was so hungry that she grabbed a sandwich from the office cafe and now she was too full to have dinner. She blamed her hectic work for her late coming. She didn't lie about it though. Her work was actually hectic. I saw her busy in office calls until midnight. Her work became so hectic that she stopped doing any household chores except for some cleaning work on Saturdays. For the 10 to 11 hours of the day she was at the office, and for the remaining hours in the evening, she was still busy doing office work. I couldn't say anything because a year ago I too was battling a difficult work schedule, and she supported me through it, so I fully supported her, did all the household chores, and cooked for us. Fiona and I have always been very transparent with each other. We shared everything with each other, even our wildest fantasies, which usually people don't share with their partners. We never judged each other. She always came home with a new set of stories that happened at her workplace, and it made me miss my pre-COVID office space so much. I'm an extrovert and love hanging out with people. Initially, it was so difficult for me to work from home, but then Fiona shifted with me, and I never felt lonely again. Now, when she was going to work and I was not, I was feeling bad about it, to be honest. Sometimes I did feel jealous that she was going to the office, meeting new people and enjoying with them, whereas I was just stuck at home. Many a time I wanted to switch to a company where I could work from the office, but my company was paying me 1.5 times more than any company would pay for my skill set and experience. Besides, I was, and still am, working for one of the most reputed companies in the Bay Area. It was meaningless and stupid to leave such a good workplace just to get rid of loneliness at home. One day, Fiona came home from work and enthusiastically said that everyone in her workplace was surprised to know that she was about to get married. They said she was settling in too fast and that she should explore more. I asked her if she felt the same, to which she said no. She was happy to take our relationship forward. But somewhere I felt she was getting influenced by her coworkers and probably regretted getting married early. It wasn't that early though, but they flattered her that she looked way younger than her age. I won't lie that I didn't get annoyed by her constant nagging about how her coworkers said she was so young and how her teammates said that she was getting hitched too early. Even if I hated this, I still put up a brave face, heard it with enthusiasm, and laughed with her. I took this to be a temporary thing because, let's admit it, work friendships fizzle out once you leave the company. Fiona was a job hopper. She switched jobs every 2 years, so I didn't take her work friendships to be a big deal. She soon started going out with her colleagues. I know it is pretty normal for colleagues to go out, but for some reason I didn't feel right about it. I'll tell you the reason. Prior to this office, whenever she used to go out for exclusive parties, she used to tag me along. The same was true for me. I used to take her with me to most of the parties I went to with my colleagues and friends. But with this office, she never invited me with her new colleagues. The weird part about going out with her colleagues was that she never told me prior. I kept waiting for her for the entire evening on Fridays. She would then leave a text during dinner time that she was going out with colleagues. The first time it happened, she came before midnight, and when I complained that she should have informed me prior, I could have also made some plans with my friends. She fought back saying it was a last-minute plan. She wasn't defensive though and said she would take care of it next time. She also dropped a truth bomb that all the other colleagues ditched at the last moment, and she ended up going alone with one of her male colleagues. I didn't react to it. She told me that she just wanted to be transparent with me. Hence she wanted me to know everything. I didn't make a big deal out of it because she too never raised any suspicions when I went out with my female friends. We were very secure about each other, actually. The next instance, she did inform me prior. I also went out with my friends, but I was home by midnight. After coming back, when I called her, she said she was leaving then, after midnight, but she arrived home at 2 a.m. The bar she went to was hardly 20 minutes away from our place. When I asked her why it was so late, she said she went to drop off one of her colleagues because she didn't bring her car. I didn't feel good about it, yet I let it slide after a while. Then comes the third instance, which was kind of a deal breaker for me. She went out again with her colleagues. I was just not able to sleep that night. I was mentally prepared that she would come by 2 a.m., but at 2 p.m., I get a text from her that she is going for a long drive to a sunrise point, 50 miles away from the city. I can't explain how angry I was with that text. It made me more restless about it. I tried hard to sleep, but just could not. I felt something was wrong. At 5 a.m. in the morning, I got a text again that her phone had discharged and might be dead soon. People who go for a sunrise to that place are usually back by 9 to 10 a.m. in the morning. At least 2 months back, Fiona and I went together to that place with our other friends, and we were back before 10 o'clock in the morning. A little after 10 o'clock in the morning, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Fiona. She said her car had broken down on the way back and that she would be late. She finally came back in the afternoon. I was so done with her tantrums for the whole night and throughout the morning that I went fishing in the morning because I was just not able to sleep. I felt so restless. I deliberately came home late in the afternoon. I came home to find her sleeping. When she saw me, she asked me to come to her on the bed. I didn't say anything and came out of the room and dozed off on the living room couch. When she woke up in the evening, she behaved as if nothing had happened. When she saw me angry, she said I was just being overdramatic. She had just gone out with her colleagues, and after the bar was closed, they decided to go for the long drive to Sunrise Point, and while returning, her car actually broke. She showed me the service center bill. I asked her whose number did she call me in the morning. She said it was from the garage that she called me. I had actually called back on that number in the afternoon, and it was from the garage. It happened almost a week ago, and I don't feel right about it. Although she didn't lie to me about her car breakdown or about her sudden plans, somehow I'm not feeling good about it. I'm just getting a vibe that she is definitely up to something, even if she is not cheating on me yet. Eventually she might. I have a strong feeling about it. I have even confronted her about this, and she shrugged it off, saying she would never cheat on me and would never leave me. I discussed this with a friend who knows both of us, and he said that I was reading too much between the lines. Maybe it was just that she was enjoying the company of her new coworker, but it would all fizzle out in some time. Even Fiona said that she was just trying to bond with her coworker, and all these would soon dry out, so I need not be worried about it. My friend even said that I was getting insecure in the relationship and that I was too emotionally dependent on Fiona. I have never been an insecure person, but these instances are making me go crazy. I came here to this space to get some neutral perspective from strangers. Apologies if the post got too long, but I added the details so that people get a complete perspective of my situation. Are these red flags? Or have I just been jealous that she is enjoying her life while I'm just stuck at home waiting for her? One thing I definitely realize is that I made my life centered around her, which I have to fix. I need to own my happiness. Anyone experienced a similar situation? Would love to get some advice. Thanks. Date 1. I know my post did not garner a lot of attention, but people who showed concern and gave me some valuable advice. Here's an update for people new to this thread. It is about my long-term girlfriend cheating on me, and since then I have stopped thinking about having any future with her. We were supposed to get married this new year. So, as I mentioned, I wasn't feeling very good about Fiona loitering the whole night with her colleagues. The more I got frustrated with her new profound hobby, the more she started going out. All the instances I wrote about in my last post all happened in a span of 1 month, so you get how frequent were her nights out trips. The worst part was when I objected to it. She called me jealous. She advised me to join a company where I could work from the office. She also pacified me, saying she would never leave me, and even if she got distracted she would come back to me. I asked her if she had already cheated. She said no. I made it clear that cheating was a deal breaker for me. She assured me that she didn't cheat, but also hinted that we both should enjoy our life without thinking too much, and that our relationship is long-term and nothing would come in between. She gave me such a mixed signal. Of late, she was being too protective of her phone. We never used to check each other's phones, so sneaking into her phone was the last thing that came to my mind. I knew her. She was smart. Even if she did anything, she would not leave any evidence on her phone. Despite that, I checked her phone one day when she was in the shower. Although there was no evidence that she was cheating on me, I somehow felt she did cross her line with the way she chatted with her male colleagues. By then, I was adamant about putting an end to the relationship because her gaslighting was draining me. She never admitted her mistake and labeled me as insecure and jealous. Our problem was that she was not giving any time to our relationship. Instead, she was busy partying with her colleagues. The ideal solution to fix this would be to give quality time to our relationship, but she chose to advise me to keep myself busy with my friends so that I don't miss her enough. This continued for a while until I put my foot down. I realized that even if she was not cheating on me, we were just not on the same page. Hence, marriage should be off our radar. I also dropped the responsibility of carrying the burden of the relationship alone and started going out more without her. She did feel bad, but she didn't say anything because she had been doing the same with me. I just didn't want to leave her like this. I wanted to hurt her. I wanted to do the exact same thing to her. So I started talking to the women whom I had been ignoring all this while. I started going with them, taking pictures with them, posting them on social media, and coming home late every weekend. I didn't hide anything from her and let her see whatever I was doing. There was this woman. Let's call her Amy. She was from my last company and used to hit on me when we were working on the same project. We flirted for a while, but nothing panned up then, and it fizzled out after a while. This time, I gradually started chatting with her, replying to her stories, and asking her out. I somewhere felt I was doing wrong to Amy, but I guess my mind was too fogged to hurt Fiona that I could not stop myself. I just wanted to hurt Fiona in the same way she did to me. After a while, it was evident to her that I was cheating on Fiona, but she said I was doing all this to get back at her. There were instances when I came home with lipstick marks on my neck and shirt collars, but she said that I was just doing this to make her feel jealous. One day, I called Amy home, and although I knew it was time for Fiona to arrive, I kept doing stuff with Amy. I wanted Fiona to see everything. When she saw me with Amy, she started crying but didn't say anything. I told her that I knew she too had cheated on me, though I had no evidence. I just shot in the air. Guess what? She admitted to it. She said it was just to experience how it feels to have hookups. I asked her why she didn't tell me about this. She told me she was scared of losing me because cheating was a deal breaker for me. We used to share our darkest fantasies with each other. Yet she didn't tell me that she wanted to hook up with her colleague. She said I was conservative in the relationship and would have never allowed that. After all these, she had the guts to say that we could have a fresh start, but I called off the wedding and gave her back the ring. She started crying hard and said I had taken my revenge by sleeping with other women, so we were even. I don't know if this is even, but surely our experience and motive were different. She cheated on me for her own pleasure and to experience all those so-called thrills. I cheated on her just to take my revenge. I know it may seem unbelievable, but I didn't enjoy any of the moments I had with any woman. All those times I just kept thinking of Fiona, that I was doing this just to hurt her. Even on the day when Fiona walked in on Amy, the entire time I was thinking of various ways Fiona would react to seeing us. I know it might sound pathetic, but that is what it is. I don't know if it was love or hatred that wanted to hurt her so badly. After the confrontation, I asked her to move out because the lease agreement was in my name. I would have left if it was rented and not leased. She pleaded with me for a fresh start, but I was done with her. While leaving, she said she would wait for me to cool off. I told her not to because I would not change my mind. It's just been a week. I won't lie, I'm feeling terrible without her, but I'm never going to have her back in my life. I'm planning for a vacation to clear my head off this. Also, I'm planning to vacate this house because it is just too many memories of her. I won't be able to move on if I stay in this house. That will update if anything develops. Update 2. Thanks for all the support in my last thread. It kinda got lots of attention. I wanted to provide a small update on my life. I called off my wedding on the day of the confrontation and gave back the ring to Fiona. She didn't give hers back. She said she would wait for me to cool down. We were in the middle of preparing for our wedding when it all happened. We were, in fact, talking with the wedding planner and visiting the venue as well when I canceled the contract with the wedding planner. Fiona called me and cried. She said she had forgiven me for my cheating and I should also forgive her. I told her I didn't want to start a married life on the basis of cheating. She said I can take a break from her for a while and then get back together. I said I surely need a break, but I'm not sure if I'll come back to her. She started crying and saying sorry. She said that everyone knew about the wedding, and now I'm canceling it. Then what should she tell her parents? I told her to tell the truth. She asked me if she could come home to meet me. I said I was busy. After that, she messaged me a few times asking me if she could come over. I told her I was with Amy, and she stopped asking me again. I wasn't lying. I continued to see Amy after my breakup with Fiona. Amy wasn't looking for a serious relationship, and neither was I. We both are just having a good time together. That's it. I'm traveling to Alaska for a month-long vacation. I hope that will help me move on with my past. I still think of my good days with Fiona and wonder where it went wrong. I don't know whose fault it was. Some of my friends said I could have saved the relationship by giving her a chance. I'm not being arrogant, but what was the point of having that relationship where I felt suffocated every day? Even prior to her cheating, she was gaslighting the situation at home. She ignored our problems and never tried to fix them. Any relationship takes two people to sustain, but in my case, I felt I was just running it alone for the last many months. Thank God I spotted the red flags just at the right time before it was too late. I hope I come out of this stronger. Probably I'll make the next update on my Alaska trip. Thanks for being there for me. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. I refused to pay my gambling addict dad's debts, so he showed up at my mom's house drunk. Now he's in jail, and my aunt says I'm ruining his life. I'm James, 28M, and I've been dealing with a complicated situation involving my dad, Tom, 52M. Our relationship has always been strained due to his gambling addiction, which has been a part of his life for as long as I can remember. Growing up, I watched my mom, Sarah, 50F, struggle to keep our family afloat while my dad frittered away money at casinos and tracks. She worked 2 jobs, as a teacher during the day and a waitress on weekends, just to make ends meet. Meanwhile, my dad would disappear for days at a time, only to return broke and full of empty promises to do better. I remember one particular incident when I was 10. It was my birthday, and my mom had saved up for months to buy me a new bike. I was so excited when I saw the wrapped box in our living room. But before I could open it, my dad stumbled in, clearly drunk and agitated. He started arguing with my mom about needing money for some debt. When she refused, he grabbed the box with my gift and stormed out. I never saw that bike again, and my dad didn't come home for a week. After that, things came to a head when I was 12. My mom discovered that my dad had taken out a second mortgage on our house without her knowledge to cover his gambling debts. That was the last straw for her. She filed for divorce, and we moved out of our family home into a small apartment across town. After the divorce, I lived primarily with my mom but spent every other weekend with my dad. He seemed to try harder during those visits, taking me to baseball games and teaching me how to fish. I remember one weekend when we went camping in the mountains. We sat by the campfire, and he told me stories about his own childhood. For a moment, it felt like we had a normal father-son relationship. But there were always signs that his addiction was still present. Sometimes he'd disappear for hours at the casino while I was visiting, leaving me alone in his small, dingy apartment. I'd sit there watching TV and wondering if he'd come back this time. Other times, he'd be so broke that we'd end up eating ramen noodles for every meal during my stay. As I got older, the visits became less frequent. By the time I was in high school, I only saw him a handful of times a year. He'd often cancel plans last minute, and I suspected it was because he was either gambling or broke from gambling losses. I remember one Christmas when he promised to take me skiing. I waited all day for him to show up, but he never did. Later, I found out he'd lost all his money at a poker game the night before. Despite the rocky relationship, I still cared about my dad and wanted him in my life. When I graduated college and got my first real job as a software engineer at a startup, I was excited to share the news with him. He seemed genuinely proud, and for a while our relationship improved. We'd grab dinner every few weeks, and he'd ask about my work and dating life. He even helped me move into my first apartment, spending a whole weekend painting and assembling furniture with me. Things were going well until about 6 months ago. My dad called me out of the blue, sounding panicked. He said he owed some dangerous people $5,000 and needed my help. He claimed he'd borrowed money for a sure-thing investment, but it had fallen through. Against my better judgment, I agreed to loan him the money if he promised to get help for his addiction. He swore up and down that he would, so I transferred him the cash. A month later, he was back asking for another $3,000. This time, he said it was to pay off some old medical bills that had gone to collections. I was skeptical, but he sounded so desperate that I reluctantly gave it to him. After that, he claimed he was almost done paying off his debts. But then, 2 weeks ago, he called again asking for $10,000. He said the loan sharks he owed money to were threatening him, and he needed the cash immediately. He spun a story about how they had shown up at his workplace and threatened to break his legs if he didn't pay up soon. I lost it. I told him I wasn't going to enable his addiction anymore and that he needed to figure it out on his own. I reminded him of all the times he'd promised to get help and never followed through. He got angry and said I was abandoning him when he needed me most. He brought up all the times he was there for me as a kid. The camping trips, the baseball games, teaching me to fish. He said I owed him for raising me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I reminded him that he was barely around and that Mom did most of the work. I brought up all the birthdays and holidays he'd missed, the times he'd left me alone while he gambled, the constant broken promises. I told him that whatever good memories we had were overshadowed by years of disappointment and neglect. The argument escalated, with both of us saying hurtful things. He accused me of being ungrateful and selfish, saying I'd forgotten where I came from now that I had a good job. I fired back that I'd worked hard for everything I had. No thanks to him. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and ended up hanging up on him. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. He started showing up at my apartment unannounced. The first time, I let him in against my better judgment. He begged me for money again, saying the loan sharks were going to hurt him if he didn't pay. When I refused, he got belligerent. He started knocking things over and yelling so loud that my neighbors came to check if everything was okay. I had to threaten to call the cops to get him to leave. He's come by 2 more times since then. The last time, my girlfriend, Megan, 26F, was over. We've been dating for about a year, and while she knew about my dad's addiction, she'd never seen this side of him before. She answered the door, not knowing who he was. He tried to convince her to let him in, claiming there was a family emergency. He told her I was in trouble and needed his help urgently. Luckily, she texted me first, and I told her not to let him in. After that incident, Megan sat me down for a serious talk. She was concerned about my safety and well-being. She pointed out that my dad's behavior was escalating and that he might become dangerous if left unchecked. She suggested I consider getting a restraining order, but I wasn't ready to take that step yet. I feel awful for cutting my dad off, but I don't know what else to do. He's refused to get help for his addiction, and I can't keep bailing him out. Every time I give him money, I'm just feeding his addiction. But at the same time, I worry about what might happen to him if I don't help. What if the loan sharks really do hurt him? My mom thinks I'm doing the right thing. She says she wishes she'd set firmer boundaries with him years ago. But some other family members, like my Aunt Lisa, my dad's sister, say I'm being cruel. They think I should help him because he's family, regardless of his faults. I'm torn between my love for my dad and the need to protect myself. I want to believe he can change, but I've been disappointed so many times before. I don't know if I can take another round of broken promises and manipulation. Am I right to protect myself, even if it means potentially leaving him in a dangerous situation? Edit. Thank you all for the responses and support. To clarify a few things. Yes, I've tried to get my dad into treatment before. I've offered to pay for rehab multiple times over the years, but he always refused. And no, I don't plan on giving him any more money. I know it would just enable his addiction further. Update 1. It's been about 2 weeks since my original post, and unfortunately, things have only gotten worse with my dad. He's escalated his attempts to contact me and get money, pushing me closer to my breaking point. Last week, he somehow got hold of my work email address. I suspect he might have sweet-talked the information out of a well-meaning receptionist at my company. He started sending me long, rambling messages. Most of them were guilt trips about how I was turning my back on family and forgetting where I came from, but a few contained vague threats, saying I'd regret it if I didn't help him out. One particularly disturbing email hinted that he knew my daily routines and could make things difficult for me if I continued to ignore him. I was shaken by these messages. I forwarded them to our IT department, and they blocked his address, but the damage was already done. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, worried that he might show up at my workplace. My productivity took a hit as I struggled to focus on my tasks, jumping every time my phone buzzed or someone knocked on my office door. Then, this past weekend, he crossed another line. He showed up at my mom's house. I wasn't there, but my mom called me in a panic. Apparently, he was drunk and belligerent, demanding to know where I was. When my mom refused to tell him, he started yelling and pounding on the door so hard she thought he might break it down. She ended up having to call the police to remove him from the property. I felt awful that my mom had to deal with that because of me. She assured me it wasn't my fault, but I still feel guilty. Growing up, she always tried to shield me from the worst of my dad's behavior. I remember countless nights when she'd send me to my room while she dealt with his drunken rages. Now it feels like I've failed to protect her, like I've let the cycle of abuse continue. The incident at my mom's house was the last straw for me. After talking it over with Megan and my mom, I decided to file for a restraining order against my dad. The hearing is set for next week. Part of me feels like I'm betraying him by taking legal action. I keep thinking about the good times we had. The fishing trips, the baseball games, the proud look on his face when I graduated college. But then I remind myself of all the times he let me down or put his addiction first. It's hard to reconcile the kind, fun dad I occasionally had with the desperate addict he's become. I keep wondering if there was something more I could have done to help him over the years. Maybe if I'd pushed harder for him to get treatment when I was younger, things wouldn't have gotten this bad. But then I remember all the times I did try to help, only to be rebuffed or taken advantage of. I've also been dealing with a lot of anger. Anger at my dad for putting us through this, anger at myself for not setting boundaries sooner, anger at the world for dealing my family such a crappy hand. There are moments when I want to scream, to break things, to let out all the pent-up frustration and hurt. My girlfriend, Megan, has been incredibly supportive through all of this. She's offered to come with me to the restraining order hearing for moral support. I'm grateful to have her in my corner, but I worry that all this drama might be too much for her. We've only been together for a year, and this certainly isn't what she signed up for when we started dating. I'm also considering joining a support group for family members of addicts. A coworker who went through something similar with his brother recommended one that meets weekly near me. I'm hoping it might help me process some of these complicated feelings I'm dealing with. Maybe talking to others who've been in my shoes will help me feel less alone in all this. For now, I'm just taking things day by day. I'm trying to focus on work and maintain some sense of normalcy in my life, but it's hard not to constantly worry about what my dad might do next or if he's okay. Despite everything, a part of me still cares about him and hopes he'll get help someday. I find myself replaying memories from my childhood, trying to pinpoint where things went wrong. Was there a moment when I could have intervened? A time when I could have said or done something that would have changed the course of events? I know it's not productive to dwell on these thoughts, but I can't seem to shake them. The restraining order hearing is looming, and I'm a bundle of nerves. What if the judge doesn't grant it? What if my dad shows up and makes a scene? What if this pushes him over the edge and he does something drastic? The what-ifs are driving me crazy. I'm trying to stay strong, but some days it feels like too much. I'm tired of being the responsible one, tired of having to parent my own parent. Sometimes I just want to run away from it all, to start fresh somewhere where no one knows me or my family's troubled history. But I know that's not the answer. I have to face this head-on, no matter how difficult it may be. Update 2. Another couple of weeks have passed, and there have been some major developments with my dad's situation. The restraining order was granted, which brought me some peace of mind initially, but that feeling didn't last long. Just days after the order was issued, my dad violated it by showing up at my apartment again. This time, he was completely wasted and caused a huge scene in the hallway, screaming and pounding on my door. My neighbors called the police and he was arrested. I felt terrible seeing him hauled away in handcuffs, but I knew it was necessary. The officers told me he'd likely face jail time for violating the restraining order. Part of me hoped that some time behind bars might be the wake-up call he needed to finally get help. But then I got an unexpected call from my Aunt Lisa, my dad's sister. She laid into me for getting my dad arrested, saying I was ruining his life. Apparently, he'd called her from jail, spinning some story about how I was trying to destroy him. Lisa said I should be ashamed for abandoning family and that I needed to drop the charges immediately. I was stunned. Lisa and I had always been close when I was growing up. She was like a second mom to me after my parents divorced. When I was in high school, I used to spend summers at her place. We'd go on road trips and she'd tell me stories about my dad when he was younger, before the gambling took over. She was always the one who tried to mediate between my dad and me, encouraging us to mend our relationship. Hearing her take my dad's side and berate me was crushing. I tried to explain the full situation, but she wouldn't listen. She just kept saying I was being selfish and cruel. She brought up all the times my dad had been there for me, conveniently forgetting all the times he'd let me down. The call with Lisa really shook me up. It made me start doubting myself again, wondering if I was doing the right thing. Maybe I was being too harsh on my dad. Maybe I should give him another chance. After all, he was still my father, the man who taught me how to ride a bike, who cheered the loudest at my little league games, who helped me build my first computer. I found myself tempted to call the police station and tell them I wanted to drop the charges. But before I could, Megan stepped in. She reminded me of all the reasons I'd gotten the restraining order in the first place. She pointed out how my dad had repeatedly violated my boundaries and put me, and now my mom, in danger. Megan's pep talk helped snap me out of it. I realized Lisa was probably just reacting to whatever sob story my dad had told her. She didn't know the full extent of what had been happening. I decided to stand firm on pressing charges. I'm still wrestling with guilt over my dad being in jail, but I'm trying to remind myself that his actions are what put him there, not me. I didn't force him to violate the restraining order or harass me for money. Those were his choices. For now, I'm focusing on healing and moving forward. I've started attending that support group for families of addicts. It's been really helpful to talk to others who understand what I'm going through. Hearing their stories makes me realize I'm not alone in this struggle. I'm also considering starting therapy to work through some of my childhood issues related to my dad's addiction. There's a lot of unresolved anger and hurt that I need to deal with. Maybe talking to a professional will help me process everything that's happened and find a way to move forward. Megan and I are planning a weekend getaway next month to decompress from all the stress. We're thinking of going to a cabin in the mountains, somewhere quiet where we can hike and just be away from everything for a while. I'm looking forward to some time away to clear my head. Work has been a welcome distraction through all of this. I've thrown myself into a new project, working long hours to keep my mind occupied. My boss has been understanding about the situation, giving me some flexibility with my schedule for court appearances and support group meetings. I still haven't heard anything more from Lisa since that phone call. Part of me wants to reach out and try to explain things to her again, But another part feels like it's not worth the effort if she's not willing to listen to my side of the story. Maybe it's best to just let that relationship go for now. As for my dad, I don't know what's going to happen when he gets out of jail. Will he finally realize he needs help? Or will he just go back to his old ways? I'm trying not to get my hopes up, but a small part of me can't help but wish for a happy ending to all of this. Update 3. It's been about a month since my last update. My dad ended up serving 2 weeks in jail for violating the restraining order. He was released last week and, thankfully, hasn't tried to contact me again. So far. I did get an unexpected email from him a few days ago. It wasn't asking for money or making excuses this time. Instead, it was a lengthy apology for his behavior. He said the time in jail made him realize he'd hit rock bottom and needed to make changes. According to the email, he's enrolled himself in an intensive outpatient program for gambling addiction. He's also attending daily GA meetings. He said he understands why I got the restraining order and that he'll respect my boundaries going forward. Part of me wants to believe he's sincere this time. I remember when I was about 15, he had a similar moment of clarity after losing his job due to gambling. He went to a few GA meetings and stayed clean for almost 6 months. During that time, we actually started rebuilding our relationship. We'd go to the movies every weekend, and he even started teaching me how to play guitar. But then he relapsed hard, pawning my guitar for gambling money, and things went downhill fast. So I'm cautiously optimistic at best. I've heard similar promises from him before, only to be let down again. I replied thanking him for the apology but said I needed more time and space before considering any kind of reconciliation. On a more positive note, things have improved with my Aunt Lisa. After my dad got out of jail, she called me to apologize for her reaction. Apparently, she'd done some digging and found out the full story of what had been going on. She felt awful for jumping to conclusions and siding with my dad initially. Lisa and I had a long talk about everything that's happened over the past few months. It was good to clear the air with her. She shared some stories about my dad's struggles with gambling when they were younger, which helped me understand the depth of his addiction a bit better. She's always been an important part of my life, and I'm glad we were able to make amends. The support group I've been attending has continued to be really helpful. Hearing other people's stories of dealing with addicted family members has made me feel less alone in all of this. It's also given me some useful coping strategies for managing my anxiety around the situation. Megan and I went on that weekend getaway we'd planned. We rented a small cabin in the mountains with no cell service or internet. It was exactly what I needed, a chance to relax and not think about family drama for a few days. We hiked, cooked meals together, and spent evenings stargazing. It reminded me that there's more to life than just dealing with my dad's problems. We're talking about moving in together soon, which I'm excited about. Megan's lease is up in a couple of months, and we've been looking at apartments. It feels like a big step, especially with all the family drama going on, but I think it's the right move for us. Work has been going well. I got a promotion last week, which was a nice boost after all the stress I've been dealing with. My boss pulled me aside and told me he was impressed with how I've managed to stay focused despite my personal issues. For now, I'm just taking things one day at a time. I'm proud of myself for standing my ground and setting boundaries with my dad, even though it was incredibly difficult. I don't know what the future holds for our relationship, but I feel stronger and better equipped to handle whatever comes next. I still have moments of doubt and guilt, especially late at night when I can't sleep. I wonder if I'm doing the right thing, if I'm being too harsh. But then I remind myself of all the pain and stress his addiction has caused over the years. I know I need to prioritize my own well-being, even if that means keeping my distance from him for now. I'm trying to focus on the positive things in my life. My relationship with Megan, my career, my friendships. I'm learning that it's okay to be happy, even when there are unresolved issues with my family. It's a process, and I know there will be good days and bad days, but for the first time in a long while, I feel hopeful about the future. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My brother's fiancée excluded me from their wedding. My family has long known of my sexuality. I came out in my teens, and everyone has been fully supportive of me. I couldn't have asked for better people around me. My brother and his fiancée are getting married, and I was one of the first people they invited. I was really happy for them. I had a gift picked out and everything. We were all so excited. Today, my brother sent me a text completely out of the blue, informing me that as much as he wants me at his wedding, he doesn't think it's a good idea that I come. When I asked why, he told me that his fiancée can't allow a sinner at the reception, her words, and doesn't agree with homosexuality, which absolutely shocked me to hear. She always seems supportive of me. I honestly never felt an ounce of hatred from her prior to this. Apparently, she can't see past my sexuality and has always pretended to be okay with it to not make things awkward at family functions. I also learned that most of her family are in agreement with this. I knew they were religious, but not like this. The more details I learned, the more sick to my stomach I felt. I loved her like a sister, and I always thought she cared about me too. Part of me feels like this is a bad dream because it just doesn't feel real. I called my brother to discuss this further, and I just broke down. I had so many questions. I couldn't figure out how to ask. He tried to comfort me. I got the sense he didn't agree with this at all but is being forced to do it by his fiancée. I was in such a state of upset that I then called my parents to explain the situation, and I couldn't stop crying. I felt so hurt and betrayed by both my brother and his fiancée. My father said if I'm not allowed to go, he's pulling out of the wedding entirely, and my mother was in agreement. I feel like I'm breaking up the family, and I hate myself for it. I just can't understand or comprehend this. My brother and I have been so incredibly close for all of our lives. He's been my #1 supporter. We have always been there for each other. I was so excited to be there for his special day. Now I just feel so depressed and embarrassed. I've rarely had trouble accepting myself, but this time it's really hitting me. I never chose my sexuality. I've always been this way. This hurts. I don't know what to do anymore. Update. The post blew up, and so many of you sent your well wishes and some really comforting advice, so I want to thank all of you. This is an amazing community. I felt so alone in that moment, reconsidering my entire life, thinking about who has really been there for me. It was the first time in a very long time that I felt shame about something I can't control. I've moved past that and searched for answers and clarity regarding the situation. I felt I was responsible for breaking up the family, but you guys assured me that it was really my brother and his fiancée that were breaking up the family. The more I thought about this, the more I realized it was true. My brother did have a say over his special day too. Many of you said that my brother was acting spineless for not defending me and should have had my back from the beginning. After my initial sadness wore off, I completely agreed with this, and it hurt to know that anything else mattered more than us, his blood family. To me, family comes first, and my brother put his fiancée ahead of us. We organized to have a family meeting in person. My parents, my brother, and I. The fiancée was not invited. Ironic because it wasn't her place. She made her position in this very clear. She made my brother choose between us. I haven't had any contact with her since I found out about this through my brother. She has shown who she really is. I've seen enough. I never want to speak to her again. We all arrived at the family meeting. The mood was tense and uncomfortable at first. I didn't know what to expect, to be honest. I just hoped we could talk some sense into my brother. I hoped my brother would see what was happening, and we could change his mind. My parents started off by reiterating that if, for any reason, I am excluded from the wedding, they would not be attending in support of me. They also scolded my brother for not defending me and said he shouldn't be marrying this girl after seeing her true colors. My brother said he wanted to defend me but felt trapped in the commitment of marriage. He thought his fiancée would come around to accepting me and was trying to change her mind. Apparently, it was even a surprise to him that came about a few months ago. They had been fighting about it for those months, but he didn't want to involve me in it, and he eventually convinced her to invite me. He said the reason for the uninvite was, in the end, the fiancée put her foot down, saying, "It's my big day. I don't have to have anyone there that conflicts with my personal beliefs. My family shouldn't have to be uncomfortable at my wedding," and threatened to actually call off the wedding herself multiple times. To which I said to my brother, "It's his wedding too, and he should have a say," to which he agreed. My parents described the move as completely out of character. I agreed. My parents then chimed in, reminding my brother of how isolated he was becoming and would continue to be at the hands of this woman. My brother eventually came to the conclusion that he's going to call off both the wedding and his relationship. He doesn't see a future with her. He said he felt controlled by her for a long time on various things, even unrelated to this. He couldn't have an opinion on anything. He couldn't make decisions without her approval. She was the mastermind behind anything and everything in their lives. He also felt that if they were to have children in the home, they wouldn't grow up in a loving or accepting environment under his fiancée. He felt this wasn't something he wanted any part in anymore. The fiancé's family was also very instrumental in all of this. We found out they were contributing financially to this wedding and were also being very controlling on all aspects. My brother assured me that he loves and cares about me more than anything, that this will never happen again. He explained how even though it was also his wedding, he felt powerless between his fiancée and her family making all of the decisions and the leverage they had in their financial commitment. The religious aspect also played its part, though, as many of you pointed out, if it was really about the concept of sin, that guest list would be empty. It was very much a manipulative, calculated move with hatred and bigotry written all over it. I was overcome by emotions at this point. I was relieved but also stunned this ever happened. There was a point where I thought I would lose my only brother, that he and his wife-to-be would run off and abandon all of us, his blood family. I sensed some sadness in my brother. He felt he let me down and was extremely remorseful. My brother hugged me and told me he loves me more than anything and that he's sorry. We just hugged for a couple of minutes, and I was thinking about our childhood and how he really was, always there for me. He defended me when I was there and when I wasn't. He did more than I could ever ask or expect. He absolutely messed up here. He was spineless. He gave into the trap instead of fighting for what was right, but I didn't want to hold it against him forever. Everyone makes mistakes. His genuine expressed remorse made it absolutely clear to me that I want to forgive him and hold him to his promise. I want him in my life. I don't want to lose him. I felt that the conversation we had was really good, and we cleared everything up. He's now in the process of calling off the wedding and his relationship. I'm going to be there for him to support him through this. It hasn't been easy for him either. He's lost his relationship of 6 years, who was at one point the love of his life. He's definitely heartbroken but was looking out for me first. As for the fiancée, I think she has tremendous hatred in her evil heart. She's a cold person. For years she pretended to be okay with me and support me, but when it really came time, she showed who she really is. She showed her dark, distorted view of gay people. It was very much a targeted attack. We aren't these evil people. We're normal people who deserve to be treated the exact same way as everyone else. Personally, I've been having a really hard time with religion. I hate the concept of hating us and hiding behind it to absolve blatant bigotry. As for me, I'm feeling in a better headspace now. I definitely feel the support and love around me. I constantly remind myself of how lucky I am, especially for my parents. They've been nothing short of the best. I showed them some of your appreciative comments in my previous post, and it really made their day to see your loving words. I want to thank all of you for all of the support, reassurance, and kind messages you've sent my way. It helped me feel like I wasn't alone. It gave me hope. It talked sense into me. I'm lucky to have the people I do in my life, and I'm very relieved it had a positive ending. Take care. Thank you all again. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Kicked out my husband's sister and family for being messy in my home. Now the whole family is fighting outside our house. My husband has 2 brothers and 1 sister. His sister and her husband are not my favorite people in the world. Recently, they have been couch surfing as they lost their home. Long story, which could have been avoided if they had adult like they should have. First, they stayed with my in-laws, but they used the excuse that my Phil has diabetes to get rid of them and their rowdy children. Next was his older brother and his wife. They had 2 spare rooms as 2 of their older children moved out a year ago, and they only have the 6-year-old and their 13-year-old twins at home. After 3 weeks, they had to move out due to a planned refurbishment. They were happy with them as they were generally tidy and helped out in the home. The youngest brother was the next to take them in. While my Sil was there, she helped out in the home and kept her children on a leash. The youngest brother's wife is very house-proud, and she allowed them to stay for a limited time only as they have had a baby recently, and her mother will be staying with them to help out for the first 6 months. Then they emotionally manipulated my husband to say okay. I agreed to it on the condition that she and her husband, as well as their children, keep the place clean. Because in the past, The only place they are messy is in my home. For example, if they are throwing something into the kitchen bin, they will throw it in the general direction of it and not in the actual bin. It's extra gross when it's food stuff that dries up and stinks out the place. Similar things happened in the past where she would leave her sanitary towels on top of the bin lid in the bathroom instead of in the bin. Her oldest daughter started her periods recently, and I asked the younger brother's wife how things were for tidiness. She said she had no complaints. They went to bed on time and kept the place clean. However, they were there for only 2 weeks. They are always tidy at the other houses. I know this from experience too, during Christmas and summer holidays when we stay over at each other's places. I've seen the difference in how they are at my place and the other places. Before they moved in, I made the younger brother and my parents-in-law witnesses to them agreeing to keeping my house as clean as it is and to chip in with chores. If they broke the rules, they would be out immediately. She fussed and denied past wrongdoings but said, "As you wish, Your Highness," sarcastically. The first 5 days were smooth sailing. This morning, I found a sanitary towel on top of the bin and not even wrapped properly. That is not all. Her daughter is staying in my daughter's room, and she made a mess of the shampoo and conditioner in her bathroom and had left a tampon on the side of the sink from last night. Her husband leaves early for work, and the kitchen was a mess when I finally got downstairs. I have a curious toddler, and I don't want him to pick up a bloodied sanitary towel. I knocked on the guest room and told her to pack her things and get out. She looked angry and tried to play innocent. She said it was only some blood and to chuck it in the bin if it bothered me so much. I told her no and picked up her suitcase, throwing their stuff in it. At first, she wouldn't leave the house, saying she was going to wait for her brother as she doesn't take orders from me. But I told her this house belongs to me too. I dropped her and her youngest ones off at my in-laws a few hours ago. Her husband came back from work, and when I wouldn't let him in and he made a scene, he went to my in-laws, but they don't want them there due to Phil's illness. When my husband returned from work, my in-laws turned up in our driveway with her and her family. Within 20 minutes, they are still standing outside and squabbling about being let in. I refused to open the door and told my husband if he backed down. He wasn't welcome in our home either. So the family thinks I'm being unreasonable because I have never liked her and I'm using any excuse to get rid of her. Update 1. Yesterday, my driveway looked like a scene from some Mexican standoff. They were out there discussing the matter while I refused to go out and engage. After 2 hours, yes, 2 whole hours, they left. They are currently at my in-laws, but they made a promise to return to discuss the matter tomorrow as everyone will be home from work, and that way we could all find a workable solution. Well, at least that is what my husband relayed. When my husband got inside, I told him that I would not have them in my house. I told him that he could clean up after them, which he did. After cleaning up, he asked why I made him do that. I told him I was just as grossed out over other people's bodily fluids as he was, and unlike him, I wasn't biologically related to them. So if he found it unsavory, imagine how shitty I felt in the past cleaning up after them. He promised to buy a new bin and bleach the sink 3 times. Our strategy for tomorrow is that under no circumstances are they coming to live with us. His niece will be made to clean up the bathroom shampoo and conditioner mess. He left that part for her. In the meantime, our daughter can use our shower. We'll see how this turns out tomorrow. Update 2. Yesterday was a long day at my in-laws. We went early to get it over and done with. My in-laws started with the guilt trip first. They mentioned that they would take them in until they found a place, but due to Phil's diabetes, it wouldn't be good for his health. I told them to tell their daughter to parent her children so they wouldn't run around amok like monkeys. That way they could stay with them as they have spare bedrooms. That didn't land well with Sil. She went on a tirade about how I've always been jealous of her and that I was trying to drive a wedge between her and her brother. I told her she didn't like her own life, so me being jealous of her and her life was a stretch that required a suspension of reality. She asked my husband if he was okay with me telling him what to do with his family, as he always stays out of my family's business. She told him to lay down the law and tell me that his sister and her family would stay as long as it took them to find a new place to stay. My husband was having none of that. He told her that the house was mine just as much as his and it was a 2 yes and 1 no deal. Just because I was a stay-at-home mom now didn't mean that I didn't contribute to buying the house when I was working. The younger brother and his wife said they wouldn't be able to host them as they had his mill staying due to the baby. The older ones mentioned the refurbishments. Both the younger and the older one's wives said that I was making it up about the cleanliness as she always kept her own house clean and kept their places clean. They told me to suck it up and act like family. I told them I wasn't there to argue about her cleanliness as I saw what I saw, and her brother was witness to it and had to clean it up. He confirmed that he did and that I wasn't making it up. My sil slipped up and said, "Why did you clean it up?" to her brother because according to her, I was meant to clean it up. Either she is the dumbest alive to admit it, or she knows she has the whole family in her pocket. Either way, I made it clear she wasn't going to stay with me, and because she got along much better with everyone else in the family, they would figure out something around their own lives. My husband told his niece that she was old enough to clean up the remaining mess, but she said no. Her father jumped in and said, "She is your niece, but my daughter. Don't you dare tell her what to do." It got heated between them, so they both had to walk it off. I told her and her husband that the only reason my husband and I were there was to get money back for the bin we had to throw out due to her sprinkling biohazards around the house. She laughed in my face and said it would never happen. I said, "Fine. I hope you realize that when I threw you out, I didn't pack all your belongings." I still had her daughters, her husbands, and her two younger ones' tablets, and some of her jewelry and a few other bits and pieces, as it all happened so quickly that day. It would all be sold to recuperate my costs. We left, but she was yelling loudly about what she would do to me if I dared to sell anything. My husband has my back, and he said, "Go ahead and sell whatever you need to." Later on, they kept texting my husband to do them one last favor by putting up with her for a few months until she got back on her feet. I told him that no matter what, I wouldn't agree to let her slobby husband, and her horde of children back in. They texted me too, guilting me about his niece's education with no place to stay close to her school. She might have to start at another school if they get a rental which isn't in the school zone. I texted back, "Tough luck," and blocked them. My husband won't block his parents but was pissed at his brothers for telling him that he was selfish to not take them in as they were in a hard place in their lives. They did admit it was gross but excused her behavior by texting that maybe I did something to aggravate it. To top this off, the oldest wife left a voice message through her husband's number to my husband's WhatsApp. She said, "I kid you not, you are still okay to watch her 6-year-old on Tuesdays and Wednesdays like usual." I told him to say, "Figure out what the answer to that request is." So that is where we are now. Update 3. Went to pick up my children and had to stick around a little longer as a new family is moving to the area. The parents wanted to meet their children's classmates' parents, so we had a small meet and greet. The office brought my husband's older brother's daughter, the 6-year-old, to me as I am the one that usually picks her up, and on Tuesdays and Wednesdays she stays with me. No one had picked her up, and when her teacher noticed me waiting in the hallway, she asked an office admin to bring her to me, thinking I was delayed due to meeting with the new parents. I told them that I wasn't responsible for her anymore on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. They took her back to the office, and they must have called her mother. When I returned home from the meet and greet, my husband said his parents had called him and spoken their mind to him about me abandoning their granddaughter. They also put his older brother's wife on the phone, and she had a shouting match with my husband. Still, I kicked out, also had a few words with him. It ended with my husband telling his parents that they had lost the privilege to talk to him for a week, and he would only unblock them when they gave him and me a sincere apology. He explained that it was up to the parents to make pickup arrangements when I had made it clear I would no longer provide free services. The sil I kicked out is staying with her parents for now. Her husband and her younger two, and two of the older ones are staying with my in-laws. The other older two are, and the other two younger ones are spread between the other two houses, but they made an indirect threat, saying it would be a very temporary arrangement as she promised it wouldn't take long for her to make her brother see the light. I think I'm in for a long ride. Update 4. It's early in the morning, and I've only slept a few hours. Don't know if I'll be able to finish this in one sitting. Friday, I dropped off my children at school, and the older brother's wife was there at drop-off time. She followed me because when I stopped to pick up some bits and pieces, she confronted me in the store parking lot. She was apologetic and wanted to make amends. I was having none of it. She was desperate, she said, because if she missed one more week of overtime, She would lose the project as she is the lead and has to stay there to supervise. Her husband can't change his hours, and so it has to be her who picks up her 6-year-old. She said it's not defensible to have a grudge against her 6-year-old for a passing comment she made. I told her it wasn't a passing comment. She laid the blame on me for our Sil leaving biohazards in my home. She said she just wanted everyone to get along and was hoping to de-escalate the situation. I asked her to ask Sil to help her out, and she said she had refused as she has 3 under 7 years and can barely cope with them. I asked her to ask the youngest wife as she has her mother staying with her, leaving her with time and energy to pick up her children, and they clearly preferred each other over me. She said she wanted to concentrate on the early memories of her own child instead of helping her out with her 6-year-old. I told her to suck it up and find a solution with those she considered family. Then I went about my shopping. In the afternoon, when I went to pick up my little one, she was there again, and when we got out of the pickup line, she followed me all the way home. So I blocked my driveway by parallel parking, so she wouldn't be able to park and harass me at my door. I sent a text telling my husband to let me know when he would be home so I could move the car. Not being able to park didn't stop her as she parked on the side road and came to my house. She rang the bell, but I wouldn't open up the door. She went round the back and knocked on my back door, telling me that I couldn't avoid her forever. We were family. I told her through the window, as I didn't want her to push her way through if I opened the door, or I would call the police for harassment. She left. In the evening, someone rang our doorbell, and I went to open it. It was my Mill and Phil. They wanted to come inside and apologize, so I let them in. They started by telling us how much the events of the last few days had affected them. Then they said sorry and asked me to get back to normal. My Mill said that sometimes you have to put up with some negativity from family as life has a lot of ups and downs. Everything can't be roses and rainbows all the time. My husband stopped his mother and said, "Then why do we, critical Backlemon and I, have to be the only ones on the receiving end of the negativity? When would they hold his sister and the others accountable for their behavior?" They tried to guilt-trip me into helping out with the 6-year-old as her mother and I had previously been on good terms. I said she lost that privilege as she chose her side. They said, "Would I be able to sleep at night knowing she would lose her job?" I said, "Yeah." My husband pointed out how much I had done for her without any financial compensation. They said, "You were home anyway. One more child that was already potty-trained made no difference to me over the past 4 years." I told them it did because I had many sacrifices over the years for their daughter. I also mentioned that if they couldn't convince the younger brother's wife to help out, then they had to forget about coercing me to do it. They wanted to know when I would return the stuff I was holding hostage. My husband said he was holding it hostage and it would be returned when his sister paid up for damages. My Phil said that Sil would be right to report the theft to the police. My husband said she could do as she pleased. At this point, my husband told them something I wasn't aware of. He said to pass on a message to his sister that he had canceled the hotel and activities, including the horse riding, for his niece for the summer vacation, because if he couldn't tell her to clean up her mess because her father had told my husband who did he think he was to boss his daughter around, then he felt no need to pay for her specific activities since her father was unsure about their uncle-niece relationship and having the right to teach her some responsibility. This made my Mill upset, and she said, "You haven't done that, have you? I thought we would all have a great vacation." He said he had. They tried to make excuses like Sil had a lot on her plate with losing the house and young children, but I was having none of it. I told them that her life situation was due to her own poor choices, and that bringing in a 9th child into the mix was not going to make her situation better. My Mill said every woman had a right to decide for themselves about their family planning. Her body, her choices, and I was not to dictate to her what she should and shouldn't do. I asked her, "Like you were dictating to me right now by weaseling your way into our home under the guise of an apology?" She said no, it was different. She wasn't telling me to have more or less children as she loved grandchildren. The more, the merrier. I told her she couldn't expect me to look after other people's children either. The less stress I had, the merrier I was. It also comes under my body and my choice. They turned to my husband and asked him if he was really putting them through all of this because we had decided to be less amiable over a silly thing. He said scrubbing down the 2 bathrooms after his niece and sister wasn't the highlight of his life, as they were stuck making excuses and lamenting over us not joining them for the family holiday, and by canceling Sil and her family's holiday and ruining the mood for everyone. We told them to leave politely. On Saturday morning, we were woken up by someone frantically knocking our door and ringing the doorbell. It was Sil and her eldest son. My husband told me he would handle it. When he opened the door, she tried to push through, but my husband blocked her away. She was shouting loudly to let her come inside so she could knock some sense into me. She threw $300 in my husband's face and said to him, "Is she happy now?" Cradle snatching. I am a year and a few months older than her, and she is just over 2 years older than him. She called me a jealous and a few other words. She told him that I had ruined their family by manipulating him. Edit to add. She said now that she had returned the money, she wanted him to rebook the vacation and activities ASAP. My husband said it wouldn't happen if hell froze over. He told her to wait outside while he grabbed something. He went inside and put their stuff in a bag, except for one of the tablets that he had bought and he was still paying the insurance for. He opened the door and threw it at her. She was cursing and told him to grow up. She said she would report him for damaging her stuff. He told her all was caught on camera, and if she wanted to take him to court to really think of her children, as they could barely afford a roof over their house, let alone a lawyer. Before he closed the door on her face, he told her to not step foot on our property again. She left without more drama. My Mill and Phil phoned us and tried to talk some sense to us. My husband and I had agreed to let them see our children under certain circumstances. They said they had grandparent rights. I told them that although I was no lawyer, their rights were very limited in the state we live in. If they wanted to have a relationship with their grandchildren, they would have to start respecting me and my family. Right now, we are NC with the other brothers, their wives, Sil, and her nuclear family. We unblock them to send a message to them and then block them again. If the children of the older brother want to speak to us and spend time with us, it's fine by us. The 6-year-old can only come by if her older siblings are there to supervise her on the weekends when we have time to host them. No more buy-in when they wish. If they let their parents use their numbers to contact us, we will block them too. While we were sending messages to everyone and they were unblocked, the older one's wife phoned me and said she would pay me $75 an hour for the days I looked after her 6-year-old. I told her, no thank you. I'll pass on that wonderful opportunity and good luck to you finding childcare for that amount. She texted me she would compensate me for the last 3 months too to sweeten the deal. I told her no. She begged me to reconsider as she had no one lined up for next week. I told her to figure out her own childcare. She was crying and I have to admit it was kind of satisfactory. So if I am a bitch for that, I will own it. She will most likely lose her job, but it's not my circus, not my monkeys. The younger one's wife wondered if she could get some help with the baby when her mother went back home, as I had helped the older one. I told her no, that would not happen because I did not want more regrets in life. But when the baby grows up and wants to spend time with their uncle one-on-one, they can come by if we have time to host them. In the meantime, she could ask Sil to help her when her mother left. Sil and her husband are completely blocked. Their children are on the NC list as things are very complicated with their parents. My husband and I came to an agreement that we would go LC with his parents. When they do visit us, they have to follow our ground rules when spending time with us. They can't mention or advocate on behalf of the others, and they can't mention what is happening in our lives to the others. If not, we would go NC with them too. All of this has brought me and my husband closer. I am happy for all the support here, and going forward, I think there will be less stress. Feels like a huge load off my shoulders. Now on to the next story. Story 5. I found an empty condom wrapper while cleaning my wife's car, sparking fears of infidelity despite our solid relationship. We have been together for about 10 years and married for 6. We have no kids now but are planning to start trying pretty much now. We are both very active, going to the gym, eating healthy, and are both in relatively great shape. My wife is gorgeous with a phenomenal body, but I would probably consider myself maybe a 5 or 6 out of 10 on the attractiveness scale. I realized that, but we have always had a really strong relationship. We started as great friends, realized we were just right for each other, and that developed into true romantic love and devotion. The sex was always fantastic, There were never any issues there with quality or frequency. I was washing my wife's car, as I do pretty often. In the course of cleaning the interior, I found an open, empty condom wrapper under her passenger seat. We don't use condoms since she had always been on birth control. I am driving myself insane with all the stories and scenarios running through my brain. She spends a lot of time at the gym, working with weights and doing her cardio like 3 hours 4 days a week, so there are frequent times when we are apart. She has never given me a reason to suspect she has been unfaithful. I know I have to confront her, but I'm scared to death of what might be the truth. She is my world, and I can't imagine starting a family with anyone else. I'm afraid I'm going to break. My wife has never given me a reason to think she has cheated before this. She has always been loving and affectionate, and we were looking forward to starting a family very soon. Some have speculated that kids coming soon may have led her to one last fling. I don't know, possibly. We are an open book to each other. Our finances are pretty much entirely tied up as one. She comes from a pretty upper-middle-class background. Her parents are very comfortable. I come from a home where my parents were fighting their own demons, and so I didn't get a lot of attention growing up. Not a criticism. It was easy to get lost in the shuffle of my parents' problems. We are cordial but not super close. I am way closer to her family, and I love her mom and dad and younger sister. Financially, we are fine together. We make about $150,000 per year. She makes $60,000 as a law firm assistant, and I make $90,000 as an auto technician. We own a house together that we were able to purchase with a down payment from her family. If worst comes to worst, I have no interest in fighting for that money. It is theirs, and they can have it back if we end up selling the house. Some have commented about the amount of time she is at the gym. We go to separate gyms. She gets off work at 4 o'clock and goes straight to the gym where she does a class, then works out with weights and cardio on the treadmill. I was never suspicious of the time she spends there. By the time she gets home, I am already there, and she jumps directly in the shower, and then we make dinner together and hang out. As far as a lawyer or an investigator, there's no way I could do that in secret with the way we manage our finances, so that's out for now. Someone explained to me how to get detailed phone records from Visible, so that's my next step. Update 1. Not a whole lot to say, but things are getting interesting. I am shaking as I type this. Thanks to everyone in the comments and the DMs for the empathy and well wishes. A lot of good tips and advice too, man. I would hate to piss some of you off. Some of you are vindictive. First off, I found a wrapper, not an actual used condom, so the suggestion of DNA testing was not useful. And thanks to you, SLUH27, for the information about getting detailed phone records from Visible. Today at work, during some break time, I requested a download of the phone records, but it says the request could take up to 45 days. I can't wait that long. I also drove by her work on my lunch break. I don't know why or what I expected, but her car was there as it normally is. Lots of good advice to track her. Get a VAR, look at her phone without her knowing, hire an investigator, a lawyer, etc. I can't deal with this. I am taking the advice a lot of you had, and I'm just going to confront her today when she gets home, as some of you suggested. I plan to just put the condom wrapper on the table in plain sight and watch her body language. I am so scared and nervous. I am almost pissing my pants. I am really starting to expect the worst for me. If she cheated, there is 0 chance we will stay married. 0. I don't care what excuses or reasons or whatever she has. I am 100% done. No therapy, no counseling, nothing. I can't believe I'm typing this. It makes it seem real. I can't imagine her sleeping with some other guy or guys. That's an image I could never get out of my head for the rest of my life. As far as assets, we don't have a lot. We have a pretty nice house that her dad helped us pay for. I'm happy to let her have it, with my fair share and paying back her father. Otherwise, it's like 2 cars, some furniture, and some decent savings that we have both contributed to, so I'm willing to split 50-50ths. The thought of divorce is burning a pit in my gut. I'll post again after I confront her. Either way, I think this thing comes to a conclusion tonight. Opie replying to a deleted comment. Yes, we have toys, but we never used condoms, and I can imagine she is taking care of herself in her car. And no, it was under the passenger seat toward the back of the seat. The car has a very small back seat, so I can't imagine having sex back there. but who knows what motivated people are capable of. Update 2. Yes, I've checked the dashcam footage. Nothing suspicious or out of the ordinary. Commutes to work, the gym, at home, maybe a stop or two for typical errands, grocery store, cleaners, zero suspicious activity. But she knows there is a dashcam too, so who knows, maybe she's just being really careful. Our current state of relationship, it's really strong as far as I know. She comes home. We share a glass of wine while we make dinner together, talk about our day, cuddle on the couch if we watch a show. We really have what anyone from the outside would be jealous of. No feelings of distance, no hiding a phone, and no drop-off in sex, which has always been and still is great. Her gym time, with as much as she does, it is really reasonable for her to spend 2.5 hours at the gym. I've gone with her. I've seen her work out. It's pretty extensive and her body shows it. I am so proud of how great she looks and how she takes such good care of herself and encourages me and cares about her health. I've never been suspicious about it, maybe foolishly, yes. She comes home and showers right away, but she's typically sweaty and feels gross. She doesn't avoid me when she walks in. She will typically come over and greet me with a kiss on the lips and then hit the shower. If she was just having sex with a side piece, I think she would be more discreet. We spend almost all of our time together on the weekends. Go for a jog, date nights, happy hour with friends, dinners with family, etc. She has a lot of girlfriends from work, and they sometimes go out for a girls' night like once every 2 months. But again, nothing suspicious. I see the credit card charges, so I don't believe she is hiding anything, and her girlfriends are all awesome, and I enjoy hanging out with them and their husbands/BFs. I'm torn and getting nervous about talking to her tonight, but I've got to get this over with. Update 3. This should be my final post on this topic. I took a lot of your advice and decided to just confront her tonight. Sorry for the length, but it was a lot. My wife came home from the gym about 6:45. Like always, I was sitting at the kitchen table alone. She came over, said hi, kissed me on the lips, and went off to take a shower, pretty much like usual. I'm NGL. When she came over to kiss me, I smelled really hard for any evidence of man scent. Cologne, soap, deodorant, sweat, anything. I got nothing. As she showered, I sat by myself, a ball of anxiety, and damn near chickened out. She got out of the shower and came into the kitchen, wet hair, wet t-shirt, looking beautiful as usual. She sat down like we always do and expected to chat about our day. She could see immediately something was wrong. She asked, "What's up?" I was shaking and so nervous like you cannot believe. I asked, "Have you lent your car to anyone recently?" "No." "Have you had any passengers in your car the last few weeks?" She thought for a second and said no. I asked, "Has anyone besides you or me been in your car the last few weeks?" She said no. What the hell is going on? I asked to see her phone. She looked at me weird, said okay, and just slid the phone to me across the table. No hesitation, and said, "What the heck is going on?" I didn't touch her phone. I took the condom wrapper out of my pocket and set it on the table. She looked at it but had no real visible reaction. I didn't say a word. After a few seconds, she said, "What the hell is that?" I said, "It's a condom wrapper." She said, "It's obviously a condom wrapper." What the heck is a condom wrapper doing on our kitchen table? She was starting to get annoyed. She is either a really good actor or she sincerely had no idea what was happening. I told her I found it under her car seat while I was cleaning her car. She honestly looked dumbfounded. She said she had no idea how it got there. She really seemed sincere and was starting to get concerned. She asked if I thought it was hers. I said, "I'm not sure." "Is it?" She said, "You have got to be kidding me. You seriously think I'm cheating on you? Are you crazy? What the hell is wrong with you?" She took her phone and waved it at me and said, "Here, please look at my phone. Call my sister, who she shares everything with. Call any of my friends. I'm not sure what you want me to say." We sat in silence, very uncomfortable, for a minute or two. I didn't take my eyes off her, looking for any sign, like a tear. I said, "What would you think if the roles were reversed?" She admitted she would probably be suspicious but would give me the benefit of the doubt. She literally went through every day the past couple of weeks, where she went, who she was with, what she was doing, trying to come up with any explanation. She finally remembered an after-work thing that they did for a friend of hers. A baby shower kind of thing at a restaurant after work. One of the girls at her office was invited but couldn't go, and so she asked my wife to please take her gifts to the party. My wife said sure. They walked down to my wife's car to put the gifts in, and my wife's stuff was in the front passenger seat. As I said, the car she drives, Infiniti Q60, has a tiny back seat, and access to that back seat is ridiculously difficult. As her friend was putting the gifts in, she spilled her purse all over the floor behind the passenger seat. That was the only possibility she could think of. As I sat there, she insisted we call that friend immediately, and she did just that. She put her friend on speakerphone. She asked her if she remembered when she spilled her purse. She answered yes. She asked if she was sure she got everything picked up off the floor. She answered, I think so. Why? My wife then seriously asks, do you and boyfriend's name use condoms? Her friend kind of chuckled and said yes. My wife asks what brand, and she answered Trojans, same size too. My wife looked straight into my eyes and asked, when you dumped your purse in my car, is there a chance there were condoms in it? Her friend said yes. It's not unusual for me to have condoms in my purse. Why? My wife told her friend about the wrapper. Her friend said she doesn't know why she would have an empty wrapper in her purse, but it is certainly possible. She hung up the phone and looked at me and asked if I would like to go through her phone. I said no, and she asked, mystery solved? I literally started crying. I was crying because I was so relieved. I was crying because I am married to the most awesome woman in the world who loves me more than anything, and I was crying because I was racked with guilt that I thought she could be cheating. I felt miserable for how I must have made her feel. My incredible wife took it so well. She hit me with her dish towel and said, Jesus Christ, I cannot believe you could think I would cheat on you, but she admitted again she may have felt the same in my shoes. She even laughed a little and said it was kind of cute that I was so jealous and nervous about asking her about it. We decided to have our glass of wine and go out for dinner. At dinner, we talked about how excited we were to start trying for a baby. I am 100,000% sure she is telling the truth. I know her. I know her like nobody else. I know her body language. I know her voice and how it sounds when she is stressed or hiding something. There was none of that. I hope none of you have to go through this, but thanks for all the well wishes. I will probably let my wife read this thread at some point, but not while it's still so fresh. Plus, she'll probably rib me for going to Reddit for advice. She's not necessarily a fan, huh? So all is good. Really, really good. Have a great life, everyone. Edit. Thanks. Composure was never in question. We are both pretty calm people. We rarely even yell at each other when we fight. I am not aggressive or in any way violent. There was never a chance things were going to get out of hand. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Considered asking my unique son to tone down his style to avoid bullying, but fear this might hurt him more in the long run. I'm a single dad to my son, Oliver, 10M. He's with me most of the time and sees his mom every other weekend. He's an awesome kid, creative, full of energy, and he's got his own sense of style that's pretty unique. He loves bright colors, nail polish, and clothes that some people might think are more girly. If I'm honest, I think Oliver might be gay, and I'm totally cool with that. I've always made it clear that whoever he turns out to be, I'll support him 100%. Because of how he dresses, Oliver's had a really tough time with other kids. He got bullied so badly at his old school that I ended up pulling him out and homeschooling him. The school wasn't helpful at all, and it was heartbreaking to see him go through that. He struggled to make friends, and it kills me to see him feel so alone. Now he's starting back at school in September, and he's really excited about it. But recently, we were at a cousin's birthday party, and Oliver wore his favorite jacket, which is a bright pink sparkly one that he loves. Some of the other kids started picking on him, saying he looked gay. I stepped in, got the kids to apologize, but it ruined the day for Oliver. I'm worried about how things will go when he's back at school. I've been thinking about whether I should talk to Oliver about maybe toning it down a bit, especially when he's around new people. Not because I want him to change who he is, but because I hate seeing him get hurt and feel like an outcast. I don't want him to feel like he has to hide who he is, but I also don't want him to be picked on or excluded because of it. But then I feel like a complete idiot for even thinking about this. I don't want him to think that I'm ashamed of him or that he has to conform to be accepted. I want him to feel free to be himself, but I'm also scared of him being hurt by others who don't get it. So what if I talk to Oliver about maybe being a bit more low-key with his style? Now for some comments where Opie replayed before the update. Comment 1, don't do it. Kids will still bully him, and all he will remember is that you deterred him from expressing himself. Trust me, the same thing occurred in our house. I was trying to keep him from being bullied, but my child felt as though I didn't accept him and that he needed to pretend he was something he wasn't. Lots of later life therapy. If he's gay, if he's straight, let him be himself and tell him as long as he likes his clothes, that's all that matters. Sincerely, the mom of an amazing queer kid. Opie. I get that, but at the same time, it is so heartbreaking seeing the same thing happen to him over and over and over again. Comment 2. Jesus, where do you live? Most kids don't care about this kind of thing these days. Opie. I live in the West Midlands of England. I honestly don't think your point about most kids not caring is at all accurate. I see it every day. Comment 3. Do not dull his shine because other people don't understand him. I understand it may be coming from a place of protection, but it needs to be addressed with the potential aggressors, not with forcing your son to change who he is. Opie. But when you can't do anything more with potential aggressors, I have done and will continue to do everything I can. But sadly I can't literally watch his back 24/7. Even though I would if I could. Anytime he has a comment made to him, it breaks his little heart, and it is so devastating seeing him go through that again and again. Update 1. Hey all, it's been about 26 days since my original post, and I thought I'd give an update now that Oliver has had his first week back at school. I can happily say that so far, things are going much better than I'd hoped. Over the summer, Oliver and I had a really important heart-to-heart. I sat him down and told him just how incredibly proud I am of the person he is becoming. I made sure he knew that there is absolutely nothing he could ever do that would change the way I see him or make me love him any less. Honestly, it was a bit emotional, and I even got a bit choked up. I told him that if wearing his favorite jacket, the one that's caused some hurt before, made him happy, I'd stand behind him 100%. But I also wanted to make sure he was prepared. I explained that while I'll always be there for him, I can't always be around to protect him, and he might have to stand up for himself if kids make fun of him. I made it clear that this doesn't mean he should change anything about who he is, but that he needs to be ready to handle it if anyone says anything cruel. Oliver understood, and we spent the summer coming up with some playful comebacks together. He really wanted to take the jacket with him to school, so we made it a bit of a project, imagining the kind of things kids might say and crafting witty replies that he could fire back with. It was actually pretty fun, and I think it helped him feel more confident about it. Now, back to school. His new teacher knows all about his past struggles with bullying, and she's been amazing. She's keeping a close eye on things and making sure he feels safe and comfortable. It's made such a difference already, and Oliver's first week couldn't have gone better. He's even made a friend, a boy named Sam, and they're really hit it off. They're planning to meet up tomorrow at the Wacky Warehouse, and Oliver can't stop talking about it. It's been a long time since I've seen him this excited about spending time with someone his age. I know it's still early days, but seeing him come home happy and smiling each day has been such a relief. Thanks to everyone who gave advice and encouragement on my original post. I really took a lot of it to heart, and I think it made a big difference in how I approached all this. Update 2. Hey, I just wanted to hop on and give a small update about Oliver's playdate over the weekend. Firstly, when Oliver was getting ready, he wanted to wear all his flamboyant clothes. He asked me if I thought it was a good idea. His friend had seen him in his jacket, but he was a little worried how he would react to the full Oliver. I told him to wear whatever he wanted, and if this friend was worth being friends with, they would accept him for exactly how he is. This made Oliver smile. He wore his full Oliver outfit. When we were walking, I could feel Oliver getting a bit nervous. He was bullied so much in his last school for how he was, so I understood why. I held his hand tight and gave it 2 squeezes. This means I love you. Something I learned to teach him from Reddit, actually. The friend's dad was with him, and he looked at Oliver and gave a little curious look. But apart from that, it was fine. The boy said he loved Oliver's clothes. They spent about 4 hours playing, and we ended up eating together. On the way home, I told Oliver how proud I am of the little man he is. I am so proud how he is so willing to be himself and so brave to continue despite any backlash he gets. I love him so much. This is my final update on this account. I don't know if I'll ever show you the posts, Oliver. Maybe in a few years when you're older so we can laugh at how worried I was about you. Your dad is so proud of you. I think you are the most amazing person in the whole world. Even when you drive me absolutely nuts. I am so lucky to get to be your father. I am so lucky you are in my life. I love you. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Parents promised to pay for my college, but spent the college fund on a vacation home instead. So I ran away from home and went no contact until I heard this news from my dad. So I, 28M, ran away from home when I was 18 because my parents were jerks who promised to help me out with my college tuition. But at the very last minute, they backed out and told me that they couldn't help me out, and left me with no other option than to rely on somebody else for the money. Let me just make it clear. I was not entitled enough to believe that they owed it to me or anything, but I had been told by my parents categorically that they would pay my college tuition for me when the time came. My parents were well off. My dad had his own business and it was quite successful in its own right, and my mother was a moderately successful real estate agent. So I had a relatively comfortable childhood, and everything was taken care of. I never had to worry about money, and I am thankful for it. I went to private school my entire life and never had to work a day until I turned 18. The reason for that was that my parents always reassured me that they would pay for everything, and I would be taken care of. So I never thought that I would ever need to worry about how I was going to pay through college because my parents always told me that they were going to handle it all. Naturally, I never felt the need to go out and look for a job or anything because I assumed that it would be taken care of, since I trusted my parents and knew that they would handle it. I also didn't have any reason not to trust them or to question them because they always gave me whatever I asked for, and I had a great relationship with my parents. So there was no reason for me to doubt them. I would not say that I was spoiled, but I was always taken care of, that was for sure. I never had any extraordinary demands either, so I was pretty easy to handle as a kid. But around the time of my 18th birthday, I started noticing that my dad was really getting worried about work and would spend way too much time in his office, which is not something that he used to do before. He seemed to be constantly stressed out, and I never knew why. I asked my mother several times if he was all right because he didn't seem so, and my mother kept telling me that he was fine, even though his behavior said otherwise. This went on for a few months, and I just assumed that it might be something work-related that he wasn't willing to talk about. But I didn't let it affect me because I had my finals coming up, and I was too busy studying and cramming last minute to care about anything else. After my finals were over, it was time for me to celebrate my 18th birthday, and I was having a relatively stress-free week until the day of my birthday. On the morning of my birthday, my parents came to my room and wished me well, but instead of leaving, they told me to get dressed and come downstairs for an emergency family meeting in the living room. They looked pretty grim, and that should have been my signal to understand that something was very wrong. But I still had no idea what was about to come. I got dressed quickly and headed downstairs. Once we were all seated, my father started telling me that he had kept a secret from me for quite a few months now, but he thought that it was the right time to tell me the truth now. My mother could barely look me in the eye, and my dad also seemed pretty fidgety. He told me that the business had been struggling for the past couple of months, which is why he had been working extra hard to make ends meet and to be able to pay all of his employees. But it's been a struggle. He told me that he himself had to take several salary cuts just so he could still continue to pay his employees, and my mother was the one handling all the household expenditure for the past few months, which was difficult because our lifestyle was quite expensive, and my mother did not make enough, at least not as much as my dad. But things were back on track now, and his business was finally doing well again, so they were going to recover the losses soon enough. I thought that was what the meeting was about, so they would just include me and tell me about it, but there was more to it, and that's what they wanted to talk to me about. They told me that now, since they were going to have to be a little more careful with money, they could not afford to send me to college on their dime anymore. I was shocked because I thought they told me that the business was doing well again, so there was no reason they couldn't afford to send me to college and pay for me. But they told me that apparently the losses in the business were not all. They had also apparently spent my college fund on a holiday home in Cabo a couple of months ago, right before my dad's business started suffering. They could have sold the holiday home, but they figured that they were just going to earn back the money soon enough and did not think that my dad's business would be in a slump for so long. My parents did not sell the holiday home because they felt attached to it and continued to spend money from their own pocket instead of just doing the sensible thing and selling a few of their unnecessary assets. This is what led them to realize that they could not send me to college, not without their finances taking a huge hit. And that was it. My world turned upside down that day, and I remember just losing my absolute mind when my parents told me that they would not be able to live up to the promises that they had been making to me for the past few years. I wasn't mad at them because my dad's business was doing badly. That would be pretty shallow of me. But I was mad that they didn't think it was important to tell me about it, so I could at least get a job or something and try to earn some money of my own so I wouldn't have to depend entirely on them for my college tuition. I know that it wouldn't be much. I wouldn't be able to make much money by working for a few months before I was supposed to start college, but at least it would be something. I was also very upset that they had chosen to keep the holiday home and everything else instead of just selling off a few things like normal people. It was pretty materialistic of them to prioritize that instead of my education. I think I yelled at them about it for a long time, and their only defense was that they were very attached to these things and it held a lot of sentimental value to them, which was a lot of BS because how can that ever be more important than sending me to college, especially when they had promised me so many times that they would take care of it all. I was really disappointed, and I didn't bother to hide it either. They had really hurt my feelings by lying to me and hiding things from me, especially when these were things that I deserved to know, and more than deserved, I needed to know it because otherwise it would only create trouble for me in the future, and it did. We got into a very bad fight that day. My parents accused me of only caring about money and being an entitled and ungrateful brat, but I don't think that was right because I was only asking for what had been promised to me. I didn't think that they had to pay for my college tuition, but after they had promised me for years that they would, I think it was fair for me to be mad, even if they had told me about it a couple of months before they did. I wouldn't have had a problem with it. But they told me just a few weeks before I was supposed to start, and it left me with nowhere to go, and I was a total mess. A lot of things were said, and the fight ended with me going back up to my room and crying until it was dark. It was my birthday, but I didn't even want to talk to anybody. So I turned my phone off and tried not to think about my bleak future. I could get a student loan, but even that would require my parents to sign off on it, and given their financial condition at the time, it would take them a while to recover from the losses that they had faced in the past few months, and I don't think that they were ready to take on a loan at that point of time. Otherwise, they would have suggested it themselves. So I didn't know what to do, and I just kept crying in my bed because I was so upset. What made me feel worse was the fact that my parents didn't even bother to come up and check on me. As if they didn't even care about me. That really hurt my feelings. And towards the evening, I started feeling upset and angry instead of just sad. In the heat of the moment, I decided that I was going to teach my parents a lesson and started packing my clothes and stuff so I could run away from home. At the time, I was not aware that this would turn into a permanent thing, and in no way would I have ever been able to predict my future in 1,000 years when I was 18. I guess I was being a bit of a brat at that time because I just wanted to get back at my parents and get them all worried about me. So I sneaked out of my room and out through the kitchen door carefully enough not to alert anybody in the house that I was leaving. I was quiet enough and was able to leave without much noise, and nobody noticed that I was gone. From there, I headed to my girlfriend, my current wife's house. My wife, Haley, 28F, was my childhood sweetheart, and I knew that I could count on her. Besides, she had been calling me all morning, but I hadn't been able to respond to her, so I thought I would just pay her a visit. I also knew that I was welcome at her home whenever I wanted to go because her parents loved me, and it would not be an issue. When I got to her house, she was the one who opened the door, and she told me how worried she had been because I hadn't been responding to any of her calls or messages all day, and I had even canceled the party that I had invited them over for. So we hugged it out, and I told her everything that had happened that day. She seemed shocked because she knew my parents as well, and she was also struggling to come to terms with the fact that they would do something so stupid. I told her that I had run away from home with a few of my things, and I was going to hide out in her house for a few days, and she seemed to be okay with it. But when I told her parents about my reckless plan, they were obviously against it and tried to tell me as politely as they could that it was a very bad idea, and it could backfire on all of them if they helped me out. At the time, I didn't realize that what they were saying was true because I was just an idiot and tried to argue with them, but they told me very firmly that they were going to call my parents and talk to them, but I could stay here until they had sorted things out. I didn't mind it though, since I knew that her parents and my parents were good family friends, so they would probably at least get my parents to apologize to me, which is pretty much just what I wanted at that point because that's the least that they could do for me. Instead, when my in-laws, Haley's parents, came back into the room after about an hour of being on the phone, they told me that I had to live with them for a few days because my parents were not ready to take me back yet. I guess, in a way, I have to thank my in-laws for making that phone call because otherwise my life probably would have taken a very different turn. On the phone call, Haley's parents had apparently told my parents that I had run away from home after they had told me that they would not be able to pay for me to go to college, and they had expected them to have a good laugh about it because it was kind of childish of me since I was just trying to teach them a lesson. But my dad was furious on the phone, and he screamed at Haley's dad and told him that if I really wanted to run away from home, then I could live with him for as long as I wanted to and that he was not ready to take any more responsibility for me or what I did since it was very clear that I was nothing but an ungrateful brat and I didn't care about the well-being of my parents. I only cared about money and myself. So they were done with me now, and I could either apologize to them and beg for forgiveness or I could stay away from my parents. My in-laws had the good sense not to tell me about what they had been told on that phone call when they came back into the room and just told me that I had to stay with them for a few days. And I was okay with it because it just meant that I got to spend more time with my girlfriend. I also assumed that my parents would come around eventually, and everything would be fine again, but that never happened. On the third day of my stay at Haley's house, her parents sat me down and finally told me that my parents had said that they were not going to speak to me until I had apologized to them for my behavior. I thought it was crazy and I was quite indignant, so I told them that I was not going to apologize to anybody for what I did because I think I was perfectly reasonable in behaving the way I did. Haley's parents tried to reason with me and told me that while they supported me and honestly believed that this was my parents being inconsiderate and quite unreasonable, I had to go back home eventually, and for that I needed to apologize to my parents. But I told them that I was putting my foot down and I was not going to apologize to them. I wouldn't even go home if it really came down to it, and I didn't want to be an inconvenience to them, so I would just look for a place to stay elsewhere. However, as I had mentioned earlier, Haley's parents loved me and told me that I was not going to go and live anywhere else until this fight was sorted out, and I would just have to stay with them. When I insisted that I leave since I didn't want to be a burden on them, they rubbished all of it and told me that they didn't mind and that I was not a burden to them. So that was quite nice of them, and I ended up spending the next few weeks in their house until it was time for me to go to college. Yeah, I was actually able to go to college, and that's also thanks to my in-laws because about a week after I left home, my father-in-law sat me down and told me that he had arranged for the money for my tuition, and I could finally make my peace with my parents now. He also told me that I didn't have to worry about the debt or anything, that I could pay it off eventually once I had a job, and it wouldn't have any interest rates either since this was not a student loan, so it would be easier for me. So then he told me to call my dad and talk to him so we could sort things out and I could move back in with them. But I didn't think it was a good idea because my problem was not with the availability of funds. It was with the fact that my dad didn't even think that it was his fault, and he had nothing to be sorry about. It was the fact that he and my mother had been lying to me and giving me false hope for months, knowing that eventually they would just have to let me down, and that just broke my heart. Even if they were to go broke, I would still love them as my parents, but I cannot forgive the fact that they had been lying through their teeth. That was not acceptable to me. So I told Haley's dad that while I appreciated his attempt to get me to reconcile with my parents, I was not going to do so, and I also couldn't accept the money because I didn't want to be in debt to him. So I tried to tell him that I didn't need the money, but he told me that I had to go to college whether or not I reconciled with my parents, and he had already borrowed money from a friend, so it had to be put to use. And once again, Haley's dad came to the rescue, and I was able to go to college. I told him that I wasn't comfortable taking money from him because I didn't want to be in debt, but he dismissed it by saying that I could just work after college and pay him back. But he had already taken out a loan, so now I had to go to college. So I ended up going, and it turned out to be one of the best decisions of my life, and I couldn't thank Haley's dad enough for it. He let me live with him, and he also funded me. I couldn't ask for anything else. Not just that, he tried to talk to my parents several times so that they would understand how I was feeling, but with no success. My parents just refused to reconcile with me or apologize to me, and before I knew it, years had passed, and I hadn't spoken to my parents after that one fight. That was the last time that I met them in person. And they were not even present at my graduation because they cut me off completely once I had run away from home. It was quite disappointing since I had always assumed that they would come around eventually. But the more I waited, the less likely it seemed. Haley's parents tried their best to be there for me, and I was quite grateful for it. Sometimes it did help me to forget that my own parents did not care about me, and I really don't think that I could have gotten through that period of my life without their support. They would always let me know that they were there for me and occasionally even told me that my parents would be proud of me. But I didn't know that because my parents were no longer in my life. It was pretty difficult to deal with emotionally because I always had a great relationship with my parents growing up. But the fact that one fight was all it took to completely ruin our relationship was just a bit disheartening. And my parents actually chose their material possessions and ego over their own son. That's just sad. So I never called them, and they never bothered to reach out to me. That was just how we stopped speaking to each other. And a lot of time has passed since then, 1 decade to be precise. So there has been a lot of change in my life. First off, I got married a couple of years ago to the love of my life. No surprises there, of course. I got married to Haley, and life has been blissful since then. About a year ago, I had a beautiful baby boy with my wife, which just completed our family. To ask about their own grandson. It's fine though. I kind of given up hope that they would ever contact me. Once I got married without them being present at the ceremony, and not just my personal life, things have changed a lot for me in my career as well. I started out working at a small firm, and I guess you could say that I worked my way to the top because now I'm in a manager position, and I get paid pretty handsomely. I have been able to pay off my debt to my father-in-law, even though he never brought it up and never asked me for the money because that's just the kind of person that he is. I wanted to let him know how grateful I am to him for everything that he has done for me, so I paid the money back to him a little more than the original amount. It's just money. It can never actually show anybody how grateful I am for all their support throughout my life. So in the past 10 years, things have changed for me, and I would say that life has only gotten better, and my 18-year-old self would be really proud of me if he knew where I had gotten to. And I genuinely never expected that I would hear from my parents ever again because, well, let's be honest, they had numerous opportunities to reach out to me. They could have tried to do so at my graduation, when I got engaged or married, or even when I had my first child, but they didn't, and that was a choice that they were making. There was no way that they didn't know about any of these events because I posted them on social media, and I had a lot of relatives added there, so somebody must have told them, but they didn't care, so they didn't contact me. I missed them in spite of everything, but I had stopped holding out hopes that they would contact me at any point because it was very clear to me that to them nothing was more important than themselves, and they refused to acknowledge the fact that they were wrong for what they did all those years ago. And if they couldn't accept that they were wrong, I couldn't let them back into my life because then it would just get toxic and messy. So in order for us to have a relationship again, they had to acknowledge their mistakes. And they did that. I didn't think we would have anything to talk about, but then about a week ago my dad reached out to me after almost 10 years, and it was not good news. After some small talk about my job and my life, he informed me on the phone call itself that my mom's health was deteriorating, and he wanted me to come back home for a couple of days so I could spend some time with my mother. When I asked him what was wrong, he told me that my mother had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease a couple of years ago, and she was really suffering. I was shocked that it had been years since her diagnosis and my parents hadn't thought it was important to tell me about it, regardless of our fights and everything. I think this was pretty big news and I should have been told about it. I couldn't hold back my anger, and I snapped at my dad, asking him why he hadn't told me, and he told me that he didn't think it was important because he didn't think I would care since I hadn't reached out to them for a really long time. So we ended up getting into another fight where it was just us blaming each other for not reaching out and being too egoistic. I was accusing him of the same thing that he was accusing me of, but I was convinced that I was right. After some arguing, my dad snapped at me and told me that he had known it would be a bad idea to call me and that my mother had been wrong. I still didn't care about them and was going to hold a grudge forever. So then he hung up and we didn't speak after that. I told my wife about that conversation, and she told me that instead of fighting with him, I should have just agreed to visit my mother because all things said and done, they are still my parents and my mother is sick, and if she was asking for me to visit, then my dad and I should have just let sleeping dogs lie instead of letting our massive ego get in the way of a family reunion. She thinks that choosing to fight with my dad instead of just letting it go because it has been 10 years was not the right thing to do, and she wants me to visit my parents so I can meet my mother, but I don't agree. I think my dad is being very inconsiderate, and I don't want to go to his house because then I will be forced to apologize to him or at least address the elephant in the room, but I'm also afraid that I might eventually never be able to speak to my parents again, and I don't think I want that. So I did, because I fought with my dad when he called me to tell me bad news about my mother. Update 1. Hello, so I spoke to my wife again, and Haley really made me realize the fact that I was acting exactly like my father by refusing to reconcile with my parents. So now I have decided that I'm going to visit my parents and try to fix things with them. I'm not going to apologize because I don't think I owe that to them, and I'm sure that they are not going to apologize to me either. But anyway, in a couple of hours, I will head out, and Haley will stay at home with our son. We have decided that if everything goes well this time, I might even invite them home to meet their grandson. This family feud has gone on for too long, and I think it's time to bury the hatchet. I want my son to have a relationship with his grandparents, and I want to have a relationship with my parents because, like Haley said, at the end of the day, they still are my parents. I still don't know how they are going to respond to my visit, but I'm hoping that things work out well. Keeping my fingers crossed. Pray for me. Update 2. So I came back from my visit to my parents a couple of hours ago, and I'm happy to say that it went pretty well. My dad was the one who opened the door to me, and as soon as he saw me there, he just broke down into tears and pulled me into a big bear hug, and I started crying as well because it had been so long. It was just way too emotional for me. And then I met my mother. She looked like a shell of her past self, and that was really depressing. We talked about a lot of things. I told them all about my life, and it was nice. We also reconciled and decided that we were all being really stupid. They apologized for the incident from 10 years ago and said that they should have been better parents. And I told them that in recent times maybe I could have also been a better son. I have also invited them over for dinner next week, and they are finally going to meet their grandson, and I don't know who is more excited about that, them or me. Anyway, I'm just happy that everything went smoothly, and I can finally have a relationship with them again. I came back and told Haley, and even she was thrilled about it. So we are thinking about turning the next week into a family dinner with both our parents. Update 3. Hey. So this is coming just a couple of hours after the family dinner, and oh boy, it was a total blast. Everybody had a great time, and it was just really warm and comfortable. My parents and my in-laws finally reconnected after a really long time since they had not been speaking on my account. My parents got to meet my son for the first time, and that was really emotional for them. We all cried a bit. But yeah, we are thinking about turning this into a regular thing now. Being around them really made me realize how much I had missed my parents in the last decade, and now that I'm back on good terms with them, I don't think I ever want to let that go, especially not with my mother's condition. I honestly don't know how much time I have with her, and I want to make the most of it no matter what. So we are going to try and make it a point to meet more often, and I really hope that it works out well for all of us. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My husband was cheating on me with his childhood friend in a hotel room, while I was suffering from depression. I couldn't take it anymore. I 29F. Never thought I'd be sharing something like this on Reddit, but I really need to get it off my chest. My husband, Jake, 31M, and I have been married for 5 years now, and until recently, I thought we were happy. We met back in college during our senior year. I was an art major, always covered in paint and charcoal, while Jake was studying engineering. He was the kind of guy who could solve complex equations in his sleep. We met at a house party thrown by some mutual friends. I remember standing in the corner, nursing a cheap beer and feeling out of place among the crowd of soon-to-be graduates. That's when Jake walked up, flashed his crooked smile, and asked if I wanted to play beer pong. I'm terrible at it, but something about his easygoing nature made me say yes. We spent the rest of the night talking and laughing, and I knew there was something special about him. After that night, we started hanging out more. We'd study together in the library, Jake working on his engineering projects while I sketched in my notebook. We'd grab coffee between classes, and soon enough we were inseparable. By the time graduation rolled around, we were officially a couple. After college, Jake landed a job at a big tech company in the city. I found work at a small graphic design firm. Not exactly my dream job, but it paid the bills. We dated for 3 years, building our careers and saving money. Then, on a cold fall day, Jake took me hiking to our favorite spot overlooking the city. As the sun was setting, He got down on one knee and proposed. It was the happiest moment of my life. We had a beautiful wedding the following autumn. Nothing too fancy, just our closest friends and family in a rustic barn venue. I'll never forget the look in Jake's eyes as I walked down the aisle, or how he whispered, "I love you," right before we said our vows. The first couple of years of marriage were amazing. We traveled, adopted a shabby dog from the local shelter, and started talking about having kids. We both wanted a family, so after our second anniversary, we decided to start trying. First, it was exciting. We joked about baby names and imagined what our kids would look like. But as the months went by with no positive pregnancy tests, that excitement turned to worry. After a year of trying with no luck, we decided to see a fertility specialist. Dr. Chun ran a bunch of tests on both of us. I remember sitting in her office, holding Jake's hands so tight my knuckles were white, as we waited for the results. Jake's tests all came back normal, but they found that I have polycystic ovary syndrome, POS, which can make it harder to get pregnant. Dr. Chun put me on medication to help regulate my cycles and told us to keep trying. It's been almost a year since then, and still nothing. We've tried everything. Tracking my cycles religiously, using ovulation predictor kits, changing our diets, even trying acupuncture. I've cut out caffeine and alcohol, started doing yoga, and taken every supplement under the sun. Nothing seems to be working. I'm starting to feel like such a failure. It seems like everywhere I go, I see pregnant women or families with babies. Every time I log into Facebook, there's another pregnancy announcement or ultrasound picture. It's a constant reminder of what I can't seem to do, of how my body is letting me down. The stress is really starting to get to me. I'm irritable all the time, snapping at Jake over little things like leaving dishes in the sink or forgetting to buy milk. I can tell he's getting frustrated too, even though he tries to hide it. Sometimes I catch him looking at me with this sad, disappointed expression when he thinks I'm not paying attention. It breaks my heart because I know he wants a baby just as much as I do. A few weeks ago, I overheard Jake talking to his mom on the phone. He thought I was in the shower, but I just stepped out to grab a towel. I heard him say, "I don't know how much longer we can keep trying like this. It's tearing us apart." Felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Is that really how he feels? Is our marriage falling apart because I can't give him a child? I've tried to talk to Jake about how I'm feeling, but it's hard. He always says the right things, that he loves me no matter what, that we're in this together, but I can't shake the feeling that he's disappointed in me. I see the way his face falls every time I tell him my period has started, or how he avoids talking about our friends' new babies. I've started to withdraw from our friends and family. It's too hard to be around people with kids or hear about their perfect lives. I've stopped going to baby showers and kids' birthday parties. I know it's not healthy, but I can't bear to paste on a fake smile and pretend everything's okay when inside I'm falling apart. Work has become a struggle too. I used to love my job, pouring my creativity into designs and illustrations, but lately, I can barely focus. I find myself staring at the computer screen, lost in thoughts about what I'm doing wrong or why my body won't cooperate. My boss has noticed my decline in productivity, and I'm terrified I might lose my job on top of everything else. Last night, things took an even weirder turn. Jake and I were watching a movie while he made dinner. His phone was on the coffee table, and it lit up with a new message. I glanced over and saw it was from someone named Natasha. The preview showed a bunch of hearts and emojis. I was confused. Jake had never mentioned anyone named Natasha before. When I opened the message, there was no chat history, just that one text with the emojis. My heart started racing. Who was this woman sending flirty messages to my husband? When Jake came back from the kitchen, I asked him about it, trying to keep my voice casual, even though my insides were churning. He seemed taken aback at first, but then said, "Oh, Natasha? She's just an old friend from high school. I ran into her the other day on my way home from work." I pressed him about the hearts and kisses, and he said, "I helped her out with a work project last week. She was probably just saying thanks." He assured me there was nothing going on and that I shouldn't worry, but something about the whole thing feels off. Why would an old friend he just reconnected with be sending flirty emojis? And why delete the chat history? I want to trust Jake. I really do. He's never given me a reason not to before, but with everything going on with our fertility struggles, I can't help but feel insecure. Is he looking for someone else? Someone who can give him the family he wants? Am I being paranoid? Or is there something to my suspicions? I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to confront Jake, to demand to see his phone and get the whole truth. But another part of me is terrified of what I might find. What if there really is something going on? What if our marriage is falling apart, and I've been too caught up in our fertility issues to notice? I feel like I'm losing everything. My dream of becoming a mother, my confidence, my career, and now maybe even my marriage. I'm scared and confused and don't know where to turn. My friends don't understand. They all have kids or are pregnant, and they just tell me to relax and it will happen when it's meant to. My family means well, but they live across the country and don't really get what I'm going through. I guess that's why I'm turning to Reddit. I need some outside perspective. Am I overreacting about this Natasha person? Should I be worried? How do I bring this up with Jake without sounding like a crazy, paranoid wife? And how do I keep my marriage together when it feels like it's crumbling under the weight of our infertility? Any advice would be appreciated. I feel so alone right now, and I'm scared of what the future holds. Thanks for reading this far. If you made it, it feels good just to get it all out, even if it's just to strangers on the internet. Update 1. It's been almost 2 months since my last post, and I wish I had better news to share. Things have only gotten worse, and I'm at my breaking point. Jake's behavior has changed drastically. He's become distant and cold, barely engaging in conversation beyond basic pleasantries. Our once lively dinner discussions have turned into silent, uncomfortable meals. He spends more time at work, often coming home late with vague excuses about project deadlines. The fertility treatments we were so hopeful about, Jake's enthusiasm has vanished. He's missed the last 2 appointments with Dr. Chun, claiming he couldn't get away from work. When I try to discuss our options or next steps, he changes the subject or suddenly remembers an urgent email he needs to send. Our sex life, once passionate and loving, now feels mechanical and forced. It's clear he's just going through the motions, probably out of some sense of duty to keep trying for a baby. But the spark, the intimacy we once shared, it's gone. I've noticed other changes too. He's more protective of his phone, always keeping it face down or in his pocket. He takes calls in another room, speaking in hushed tones. When I walk in, he quickly ends the conversation. The stress and anxiety have taken their toll on me. I couldn't focus at work, making careless mistakes and missing deadlines. My boss was understanding at first, but after a series of stern warnings, I decided to quit before I could be fired. I thought Jake would be concerned, but he barely reacted when I told him. He just nodded and said, "If that's what you think is best." Now I'm home all day, alone with my thoughts and fears. I've tried to fill my time with hobbies, but nothing holds my interest. I've started sleeping more, sometimes not getting out of bed until the afternoon. Jake doesn't seem to notice or care. A week ago, I decided I needed answers. When Jake left for work, I started following him. I know it sounds crazy and invasive, but I was desperate to understand what was happening to my marriage. The first few days, I lost him in traffic or he went straight to his office. But yesterday, everything changed. I watched him leave work early, something he claimed he could never do. He drove to a part of town I didn't recognize and parked outside a hotel. My heart was pounding as I watched him check in and go up to a room. I waited in my car, telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a work event or a surprise for me, even though our anniversary was months away. Then I saw her. A tall, blonde woman I'd never seen before, walked into the hotel and went straight to the elevator. She was gorgeous, the kind of woman who turns heads when she walks by. I knew in my gut this was Natasha. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind racing with possibilities, each worse than the last. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I marched into the hotel and up to the room I'd seen Jake enter. I knocked, no, pounded on the door. I heard Jake's voice, angry and annoyed, yell, "Just a minute." A few seconds later, he opened the door, wearing nothing but a towel. His hair was wet, his chest still glistening with water droplets. The look on his face when he saw me, I'll never forget it. Shock, guilt, and then anger flashed across his features. Behind him, I could see rumpled sheets on the bed and a woman's purse on the nightstand. I lost it. I started yelling, calling him every name I could think of. I demanded to know how long this had been going on, if she was the reason he'd given up on us. Jake tried to quiet me, to pull me into the room, but I was beyond reason. The woman, Natasha, I assumed, peeked out from the bathroom, wrapped in a sheet. She looked terrified and quickly ducked back inside. By this point, other hotel guests had come out to see what the commotion was about. I was crying and screaming, telling everyone who would listen that my husband was a cheating bastard. Jake kept trying to calm me down, to get me to leave, but I was beyond his control. Eventually, hotel security came. They asked us to leave, but I refused to go anywhere with Jake. I told him he was cheating on me, that the woman in his room wasn't his wife. The security guard looked uncomfortable, but said it wasn't his business to intervene in domestic disputes. Jake finally got dressed, and Natasha slipped out while he was trying to talk to me. I saw her rush to the elevator, her face red with shame. Good, I thought. She should be ashamed. In the end, I left Jake at the hotel. I told him not to come home, that I'd have his things packed and left with his parents. The last thing I said to him was that I'd see him in court. I drove home in a daze, my mind replaying everything I'd seen and heard. How could he do this to me? After everything we'd been through? How could he throw it all away for some blonde bimbo? I'm writing this from my sister's guest room. I couldn't bear to be in our house, surrounded by memories of what I thought was a happy marriage. I don't know what I'm going to do next. Part of me wants to try to work things out. 5 years of marriage has to count for something, right? But a bigger part knows I could never trust him again. I guess I'm back to square one, asking Reddit for advice. How do I even begin to pick up the pieces of my life? Has anyone been through something similar? How did you cope? Thank you for listening. I never thought I'd be that woman, the one with the cheating husband, but here I am. Any words of wisdom would be appreciated. Update 2. It's been 6 months since that awful day at the hotel, and I'm finally ready to share an update. These past months have been the hardest of my life, but I'm slowly starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. After I caught Jake cheating, I stayed with my sister for a few weeks. I was a mess, barely eating, crying constantly, and unable to sleep without nightmares. My sister was amazing, taking care of me and helping me navigate the initial shock and pain. When I felt strong enough, I decided to confront the situation head-on. I reached out to both our families and close friends to explain what had happened. Their reactions were mixed, to say the least. Jake's family, especially his mother, were surprisingly cruel. My mother-in-law had the audacity to blame me for Jake's infidelity. She said, and I quote, "If you had been able to give him a child, he wouldn't have had to look elsewhere." She went on about how a barren woman couldn't give a man the happiness of a family. Her words cut deep, reopening wounds I thought were starting to heal. My own family rallied around me. My parents were furious with Jake and his family. They argued that my fertility struggles were no excuse for cheating. My dad wanted to drive across 3 states to have a word with Jake, but I managed to talk him out of it. My siblings were supportive too, offering places to stay and shoulders to cry on. Our friends were split. Some, mostly couples with kids, seemed to sympathize with Jake. They didn't outright condone his actions, but they made comments about how hard it must have been for him dealing with the stress of infertility. Others were firmly on my side, disgusted by Jake's betrayal. Through all of this, Jake tried to apologize. He sent flowers, called constantly, and even showed up at my sister's place, begging for another chance. He swore it was a one-time mistake, that Natasha meant nothing to him. But I couldn't believe him. The trust was shattered, and no amount of roses or apologies could fix it. I filed for divorce about a month after the hotel incident. Jake contested it at first, still insisting we could work things out, but eventually he agreed to an uncontested divorce. We divided our assets, sold our house, and went our separate ways. The day I signed those final papers was both heartbreaking and liberating. The divorce process brought up all the pain and anger I'd been trying to suppress. I fell into a deep depression, Some days I couldn't even get out of bed. The future I'd imagined, kids, growing old with Jake, was gone, and I felt lost without it. I started seeing a therapist, which has been incredibly helpful. She's helping me work through my feelings of inadequacy and failure. I'm learning that my worth isn't tied to my ability to have children or to keep a man faithful. It's a slow process, but I'm getting there. One of the hardest parts has been learning to be alone. Jake and I had been together since college, and suddenly I was on my own for the first time in my adult life. Simple things like cooking for one or sleeping in an empty bed felt strange and lonely, but gradually I'm finding my footing. I've reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I joined a support group for women dealing with infertility and divorce, and it's been comforting to talk to people who truly understand what I'm going through. We meet weekly, and those meetings have become a lifeline for me. As for work, I've started freelancing as a graphic designer. It's not steady yet, but it's giving me a sense of purpose and independence. I'm even thinking about going back to school to learn new skills and maybe change careers entirely. I've also started focusing on my health, both physical and mental. I've taken up yoga and running, which have helped clear my mind and make me feel stronger. I'm eating better and have even lost a bit of weight. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm taking care of myself. For me, not for the possibility of getting pregnant. There are still hard days, of course. Days when I see happy families in the park and feel that familiar ache. Days when I miss the comfort and familiarity of my life with Jake. But those days are becoming fewer and farther between. I ran into Natasha at the grocery store last week. It was awkward and painful, but I managed to hold my head high. She tried to apologize, saying she didn't know Jake was married. I didn't want to hear it, but in a way, the encounter gave me closure. I realized I don't hate her anymore. My anger is reserved for Jake and the choices he made. As for Jake, I heard through mutual friends that he's moved to another state for work. Part of me is relieved. It's easier to move on without the possibility of running into him. Another part feels a twinge of sadness, marking the final end of our shared life. So here I am, 6 months later, single, starting a new career, and slowly learning to love myself again. It's not the life I imagined, but I'm beginning to see possibilities I never considered before. Maybe I'll adopt or foster kids someday. Maybe I'll travel the world. Maybe I'll fall in love again. Or maybe I'll discover that I'm happiest on my own. For the first time in a long time, I'm looking forward to the future instead of dreading it. To anyone going through something similar, hang in there. It gets better. It gets easier. And you're stronger than you know. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. Your kind words and advice have meant more than you can imagine. Now on to the next story. Story 9. My sister blamed me for her divorce, and my family abandoned me for that. 3 years later, I see her working at McDonald's, and she asks for help. But then I get to know this shocking truth. I, 28M, come from a family where my elder sister, Marie, 34F, has always been the golden child. Our parents doted on her, giving her everything she wanted, while often neglecting my needs. Growing up, I learned to keep my head down and stay out of trouble, as any attempt to stand up for myself would result in punishment or ridicule. Marie got married to Lucas, 36M, when she was 25. I was happy for her, hoping that marriage would help her mature and become more responsible. However, I soon realized that wasn't the case. Marie continued her party lifestyle, often staying out late and coming home drunk. I overheard arguments between her and Lucas about her behavior, but our parents always defended Marie, saying Lucas was too controlling. About 2 years into their marriage, I started noticing signs that Marie might be cheating on Lucas. She would get mysterious calls late at night, hide her phone when anyone was around, and make up excuses to leave the house at odd hours. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was mounting. One day, I accidentally saw a text on Marie's phone from someone named Elle, talking about meeting up at a hotel. I was conflicted about what to do with this information. On one hand, I felt Lucas deserved to know the truth. On the other hand, I knew speaking up would only cause trouble for me, so I kept quiet, hoping the situation would resolve itself. Things came to a head when Marie introduced us to her friend, Liam, 32M. Liam started coming around our house frequently, and I couldn't help but notice the way he and Marie looked at each other. It was clear there was more going on between them than just friendship. The real turning point came during a family barbecue. My girlfriend, Abigail, 27F, was there, and Liam took an immediate dislike to her. Throughout the evening, he made snide comments about her appearance and background. When Abigail excused herself to use the restroom, I overheard Liam telling Marie that she was way out of my league and that I should stick to my own kind. I was furious but tried to keep my cool for Abigail's sake. However, things escalated when Liam accidentally spilled his drink on Abigail's dress. As she stood there, mortified and on the verge of tears, Liam laughed and made a crude joke about her now being in a wet t-shirt contest. That was the last straw. I confronted Liam, telling him to apologize to Abigail and leave. Marie jumped to Liam's defense, calling me oversensitive and saying it was just a joke. When I refused to back down, Marie turned to our parents, playing the victim as she always did. To my shock and disappointment, they sided with her, telling me I was ruining the party and should apologize to Liam. In that moment, something snapped inside me. Years of pent-up frustration and resentment came pouring out. I told everyone present about Marie's affair with Liam, showing them the text I had seen on her phone. I even had pictures of them together at a hotel, which a friend had sent me after spotting them. The aftermath was chaos. Lucas was devastated. Marie was screaming at me, and our parents were in shock. In the days that followed, Lucas filed for divorce. Marie, instead of taking responsibility for her actions, blamed me for ruining her marriage. She cried to our parents, spinning a tale about how I had always been jealous of her and had made up lies to destroy her happiness. To my disbelief, our parents believed her. They accused me of betraying the family and causing unnecessary drama. When I tried to defend myself and point out Marie's history of infidelity, they refused to listen. My father told me I was no longer welcome in their house unless I apologized to Marie and retracted my lies. Couldn't believe it. After years of enduring Marie's selfish behavior and our parents' favoritism, I was being punished for finally standing up for myself and my girlfriend. I packed my things and left that night, with Abigail by my side, supporting me through it all. The next few months were tough. I had to find a new place to live and figure out how to support myself without any help from my family. Abigail was my rock during this time, helping me find a job and an apartment. We grew closer through this ordeal, and I realized she was the family I needed. It's been 3 years since that day. I've built a new life for myself in another state. Abigail and I got married last year, and I have a good job that I enjoy. We're happy, and I've learned to let go of the pain and anger I felt towards my family. I thought I had put that chapter of my life behind me until yesterday. I was grabbing lunch at a McDonald's drive-thru when I saw a familiar face at the window. It was Marie. She looked different, tired, older than her years. When she saw me, her eyes widened in recognition, and she quickly looked away, clearly embarrassed. I was shocked to see her working there, especially in a different state. As I drove away with my order, my mind was racing with questions. What happened to her? Why was she working at McDonald's? Where were our parents? After some internal debate, I decided to go back later during her break. I found her sitting alone outside, picking at a salad. When I approached her, she looked up, a mix of shame and defiance in her eyes. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice lacking the confidence it once had. I sat down across from her and asked, "What happened, Marie? Why are you here?" She hesitated for a moment before the story came pouring out. Apparently, things hadn't gone well for her after the divorce. Our parents had eventually thrown her out, unable to support her lifestyle anymore. She had moved in with Liam and followed him to the state when he said he had a job opportunity, but it turned out he was running from debt collectors. Now she was stuck here, working this job to make ends meet, while Liam was between jobs. As she finished her story, Marie looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I know I messed up," she said. "I've made so many mistakes, but I'm really struggling now. Is there any way you could help me out? Just a little money to get back on my feet." I sat there conflicted. Part of me wanted to help her. She was still my sister, after all. But another part remembered all the pain she had caused me and Abigail. I told her I'd think about it and left. Now I'm home, trying to process everything that happened. I haven't told Abigail about seeing Marie yet. I'm not sure what to do. Should I help Marie? Should I try to contact our parents and find out their side of the story? Or should I just walk away and leave the past in the past? I could use some advice, Reddit. What would you do in my situation? Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since I encountered Marie at McDonald's, and a lot has happened since then. I want to thank everyone for their advice and support on my original post. Your comments gave me a lot to think about and helped me navigate this difficult situation. After much deliberation, I decided to do some digging before making any decisions about helping Marie. I reached out to some old family friends and distant relatives to try and piece together what had happened after I left. What I discovered was shocking, to say the least. It turns out that Marie's sob story about our parents throwing her out was far from the truth. According to my sources, after I left, Marie continued to live with our parents. She brought Liam to live with them as well, claiming they were just friends and she needed support after her divorce. For the first few months, things seemed okay. Our parents, still believing Marie's version of events, continued to support her. They even helped her find a job and were paying for her therapy sessions, which I later found out she never actually attended. However, about 8 months after I left, Marie started pressuring our parents to transfer the house to her name. She claimed it was for security and promised to take care of them. Our parents, always eager to please Marie, eventually gave in, despite some reservations. What happened next was truly despicable. As soon as the house was in her name, Marie and Liam sold it without warning. They disappeared with the money, leaving our parents homeless and broke. I was horrified to learn that my parents, now in their late 60s, were living in a small room in an old hospice facility. They were surviving solely on my father's pension, which was barely enough to cover their basic needs and medical expenses. This revelation hit me hard. I spent several days processing this information, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. Anger at Marie's betrayal, guilt for not being there for my parents, and confusion about how to proceed. I decided to confront Marie with what I had learned. I went back to the McDonald's during her break and laid out everything I knew. The look on her face told me it was all true. Marie broke down, alternating between making excuses and begging for forgiveness. She claimed she never meant for things to go this far, that Liam had manipulated her, and that she was now trapped in an abusive relationship with him. While a small part of me felt sympathy for her, I couldn't forget the magnitude of what she had done. I told her I couldn't offer her any financial help, but I could give her information for local women's shelters and abuse support groups if she was serious about leaving Liam. She didn't take this well. Marie lashed out, accusing me of being selfish and unforgiving. She brought up old grievances, claiming I had always been jealous of her and that I was enjoying seeing her suffer. I realized then that she hadn't changed at all. She was still the same manipulative person who had caused so much pain in our family. I left her there, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. I had finally seen Marie for who she truly was, and I knew I had made the right decision in not helping her financially. Now I'm faced with a new dilemma. Should I reach out to my parents? Part of me wants to help them. They're elderly and in a difficult situation, but I can't forget how they treated me. How they always chose Marie over me, even when I was telling the truth. I've discussed this with Abigail, and she's been incredibly supportive. She said she'll stand by whatever decision I make, but she gently reminded me that I don't owe my parents anything after how they treated me. I'm torn. On one hand, I feel a sense of obligation to help them. They're still my parents, despite everything. On the other hand, I'm afraid of opening old wounds and potentially inviting more drama into my life. I'm considering maybe sending them some anonymous financial help through a lawyer without revealing my identity, but I'm not sure if that's the right thing to do either. I could use some more advice, Reddit. How would you handle this situation with my parents? Should I reach out to them directly? Send anonymous help? Or should I continue to keep my distance? Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and I wanted to share the latest developments in this ongoing family saga. After much soul-searching and long discussions with Abigail, I decided to reach out to my parents. It wasn't an easy decision, and I had a lot of reservations, but I felt I needed to at least know their side of the story. I hired a private investigator to locate them, as they were no longer at the hospice facility I had heard about. It turned out they had moved to a small, run-down apartment in a not-so-great part of town. I wrote them a letter explaining that I had learned about their situation and that I was willing to talk if they were interested. I included my phone number but not my address, still wary of potential manipulation. To my surprise, my father called me just 2 days after I sent the letter. His voice sounded older, more fragile than I remembered. He asked if we could meet in person, and after some consideration, I agreed. We met at a neutral location, a small cafe halfway between our homes. When I saw my parents, I was shocked at how much they had aged. My mother looked frail and tired, while my father's once confident posture was now stooped and uncertain. The conversation was awkward at first. There was so much unspoken hurt and resentment between us. But as we talked, the full story of what happened after I left began to emerge. They admitted that they had been wrong to always side with Marie. They explained how she had manipulated them, playing on their emotions and their desire to keep the family together. They confessed that deep down they had known I was telling the truth about her affair, but they couldn't bring themselves to accept it. When Marie sold the house and disappeared with the money, it had been a brutal wake-up call for them. They realized too late the extent of her selfishness and deceit. They told me they had tried to press charges, but without proof that they hadn't willingly given her the house, there was little they could do legally. As they spoke, I could see the genuine remorse in their eyes. They apologized for how they had treated me, acknowledging that their favoritism towards Marie had been unfair and damaging. My mother, with tears in her eyes, told me how proud they were of the life I had built for myself, despite their lack of support. I won't lie. Hearing their apology and their pride in me stirred up a lot of emotions. Part of me wanted to forgive them instantly and welcome them back into my life, but another part remembered the years of hurt and rejection. I told them I appreciated their apology, but that rebuilding our relationship would take time. I explained that I had my own family now with Abigail, and my priority was protecting our peace and happiness. They seemed to understand, expressing gratitude for even having this conversation. Before we parted, I gave them my contact information and told them we could stay in touch. In the weeks since that meeting, we've had a few phone calls. They're brief and sometimes awkward, but it's a start. I've also arranged for some financial assistance to help them move to a better apartment and cover some of their medical expenses. I made it clear that this help came with no strings attached. I wasn't doing it to buy their affection or to obligate them in any way. As for Marie, I haven't heard from her since our confrontation at McDonald's. Part of me hopes she's found the courage to leave Liam and get help, but I'm not optimistic. I've made peace with the fact that she may never be a part of my life again, and I'm okay with that. This whole experience has been a roller coaster of emotions. I'm still processing everything and trying to figure out what kind of relationship, if any, I want with my parents moving forward. Abigail has been my rock through all of this, offering support and a listening ear whenever I need it. I'm not sure what the future holds for my family relationships, but I do know this. I'm proud of the life I've built, the strength I've found in myself, and the family I've chosen with Abigail. Whatever happens, I won't let the pains of the past dictate my future happiness. Thank you again, Reddit, for all your support and advice throughout this journey. It's meant more to me than you can know. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video. 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 You in the next video.